Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Benno Numer. In today's story, we focus on the Numer family, who live in Balna, a city in northern Italy. The family consists of parents Peter Numer and Laura Perselli. Their son Benno is 30 years old, and their daughter Maid is 27 years old. Benno is a doctor who has completed his university education and is dedicated to fitness. His father, Peter, is 63 years old, and his mother, Laura, is 68 years old. Both retired from teaching at school. Despite their age, they are still active in social and cultural activities. The family is respected in the community. On January 4, 2021, Laura and Peter suddenly disappeared. They were last seen that morning when they went to the supermarket. Laura was planning to visit her mother, who had just returned home from the hospital. Laura rode her bike to her mother's house. A few hours later, Laura's sister sent her a short video of their sick mother, but Laura never opened the message. At the same time, Laura's daughter Maid was on vacation with a friend outside the city and sent her mother a photo but received no response. Benno called his mother at 8:30 that evening, but she did not answer. 3 minutes later, he sent a voice message to his girlfriend, Martina, expressing his concern that he had not been able to reach his parents. He told her that he would be at her house in about an hour or two for dinner as planned, and that he would be late. Benno asked her to call him back later on a regular phone line instead of WhatsApp because he did not have an internet connection. Martina called him back shortly afterwards, and they arranged to meet at 10:12 p.m. When Benno arrived at her house in his father's car, he said he had forgotten to shower. He went to wash his face and asked Martina if she could do his laundry. She didn't ask any questions and agreed to help. Benno gave Martina a bag full of dirty clothes. She didn't check the contents and threw them in the washing machine. The couple then had a great evening at the bar and a passionate night at her house. Benno didn't leave his girlfriend's house until 5:30 a.m. When he was with her at around 11 p.m., he sent his mother a short text message wishing her a good night. He noticed that she hadn't read it, but he was too busy that evening to think about it. Early in the morning of January 5, Laura's sister came to her house. She knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no response. It was clear that no one was home. Laura's sister was worried and called Benno to ask about Laura and Peter. However, Benno said he was not home and did not know where they were. Laura's sister was busy taking care of her sick mother and could not leave her alone, so she asked Benno to try to find them. Benno promised to help and suggested that their parents might have gone to the mountains, as they often did. He advised them to wait a few days. Meanwhile, Laura's daughter, Maid, was at the resort with her friend and boyfriend. She noticed that her messages had been ignored, which made her suspicious. She called her dad and was surprised when he didn't answer. His social media pages also showed unread messages, and she couldn't reach her parents, which made her even more worried. So Maid called her brother Benno, who said he was walking his dog in the mountains a few kilometers away from their parents' house, and he couldn't check on them. He seemed worried throughout the call, and his story sounded strange. The dog was very old and sick, barely moving even in their yard, so it was hard to believe he could hike several kilometers into the mountains with the dog. Unable to get more information from Benno, Maid decided to ask a neighbor who lived next door to her parents for help around 1:30 p.m. The neighbor was home, so she agreed to check on her parents. The neighbor knocked on the door, and Benno opened it. At that time, the neighbor was still on the phone with Maid. She immediately recognized her brother's voice and was surprised that he had just refused her request to check on her parents. Benno explained that he had rushed back to his parents' house after walking the dog and was now home. Benno said that their parents were not home and insisted that he did not know where they had gone. Maid called all the hospitals in the city because she had a strong feeling that something was wrong with her parents. Eventually, Maid stopped her outing and returned home. She asked Benno if he knew what had happened to their parents, but he said he did not know. He explained that he had spent the previous day with his girlfriend and had only returned home in the morning when their parents were no longer there. Feeling desperate, Maid decided to contact the police to report her parents missing. At this point, Benno began to discourage her from calling the police. He seemed to be stalling for time, but he suggested another approach that he thought would be more effective. So he contacted a friend who was a police officer for advice on how to handle the situation. Benno's friend suggested contacting a search and rescue service that specialized in mountain rescue, but that didn't help either. In the end, May decided to go to the police himself, regardless of whether Benno supported her decision or not. He eventually agreed, and they went to the police station together. The young man told them about his parents' disappearance and suggested that they might have gone into the mountains. He mentioned that an avalanche had occurred in the area they frequented, about a day after they left. He believed that his mother and father might have been buried under the snow. This explanation seemed plausible to the police and became the main focus of the investigation. Laura and Peter were declared missing, and search teams were deployed to the site of the avalanche. Trained dogs were used to search. Despite a thorough search, it took a long time to cover the entire area. The police decided to interview Benno to gather more information. They noticed that he was evasive and increasingly uncomfortable when asked difficult questions, making his behavior seem suspicious. After leaving the office, Benno suddenly displayed a sudden and inexplicable aggression. He attributed this outburst to hunger, fatigue, and stress. The next day, there was still no news from the police about Peter and Laura, prompting Maid to return to the station. Benno tried to stop her again, insisting that the police needed more time to conduct the search. During this time, another girl named Jasmine contacted Benno. It turned out he was chatting with 3 other people on Tinder, and he was particularly interested in Jasmine, and he showed little interest in the ongoing investigation. On January 6, Maid returned to the police station. It had been 2 days since her parents had gone missing. Laura and Peter had not contacted her, which made her believe that something had happened to her parents. They usually informed her before they went into the mountains and would prepare carefully for such trips. She felt the need to conduct a more thorough search of the area near their home. The police were actively involved from the beginning. Initially, they focused on the possibility that the couple had gone missing in the mountains. During this time, Benno went to the supermarket with his new girlfriend, Jasmine, where he bought a large amount of hydrogen peroxide, explaining that he needed it to prepare to sell his father's car. Search teams along with volunteers were organized to search the areas outside the mountains and around Laura. Despite the large resources and the participation of about 600 people in the search effort, Peter and Laura were still missing. Everyone worked together in the hope of finding them quickly. Finally, Maid expressed her concerns. She thought about Benno's strange behavior and the fact that their parents had disappeared shortly after she left the city for a short time. During that time, Benno was supposed to be with them, and their relationship was complicated. She suspected that he might know more than he was letting on. The police decided to question Benno again. This time, during questioning, he was overly friendly, which was surprising given his violent reaction after his previous encounter with the police. The officers suspected that he was deliberately controlling his demeanor to avoid revealing any important information. During this time, suspicions grew that Peter and Laura were likely dead, and it was believed that the couple's son, Benno, might be involved. Benno became the prime suspect. Maid regularly contacted the police, sharing information about Benno and their parents. Benno's behavior was often so rude and aggressive that Laura was afraid to be home alone with him. On January 7, the police tracked Benno down. That day, Jasmine and Benno got into the family car and went to a hardware store where they bought rags, cleaning supplies, a bucket, and hydrogen peroxide. While Benno asked Jasmine to pay for the items, they stopped at a car wash before heading home. The police arrested them there and found all the items they had purchased in the trunk of the car. The car was impounded for further investigation. The police also attempted to confiscate Benno's jacket, but he refused to hand it over. Benno was questioned again that day. Ultimately, he did not provide any useful information, and since there was no evidence against him, he was released. Although the police confiscated the cleaning kit, Benno and Jasmine decided to clean the house. Benno asked her to wear the jacket the police had asked to confiscate. She did not suspect anything and agreed. After a short while, he took the jacket off Jasmine and put it away. Later that day, the police arrested Jasmine, thinking she might be involved in the case. They questioned her for hours about Peter and Laura's disappearance, but could not find any evidence to link her to the crime. Jasmine is later confronted by the Carabinieri police several times during interrogation, including when Benno's jacket is confiscated. Her hair and skin particles are found on the jacket, forcing her to prove her innocence. She explains that she helped Benno clean the house and wore the jacket, but she was unaware of the implications and risk of harm to herself. On January 17, Maid returns to her parents' house and finds Benno there. She decides to voice her suspicions, which leads to an altercation between them. Maid suggests that Benno may be involved in Peter and Laura's disappearance. He becomes hysterical, shaking as he tries to convince her that she is mistaken. He eventually swears that he had nothing to do with it. Despite his assurances, she remains suspicious of Benno, knowing he is a good liar. Benno tries to justify his actions. However, Maid knew about his troubled relationship with their parents and his aggressive nature. He was the only one capable of causing harm to their loved ones. On January 18, Benno was the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that he had killed his parents and then hidden their bodies. But the police lacked solid evidence. They only found a small blood stain on the car, not enough to confirm the death of his parents. However, the investigation continued. Important information came to light when Benno's phone was confiscated and examined. Geolocation data from the phone was examined on the evening when Peter and Laura went missing. The data showed that Benno had left the city and stopped near the bridge on the Adige River, where he stayed for a considerable amount of time. The police believed that he may have dumped their bodies there. This location became the focus of the search for evidence. On February 6, 2021, a search operation was launched in the Adige River. Police quickly located Laura's body. However, her husband, Peter, had been missing for more than 3 months. He was finally found on April 27, after Laura's body was discovered on the riverbank. A brown stain that looked like blood was found on the bridge over the river. Forensic experts analyzed the sample and confirmed that it was Peter's blood. Surveillance camera footage captured Benno's car on the evening of the incident as he returned from the bridge to his ex-girlfriend Martina's house, confirming that he was at the scene where the bodies were found. Peter's body was found by forensic experts in relatively good condition. A layer of algae had formed on it, slowing down decomposition, and the cold temperature helped preserve the tissues. This made it easy to spot signs of strangulation on both Peter and his wife. Marks on their necks indicated that they had been attacked from behind. The cause of death was confirmed to be strangulation, and it was determined that they had been thrown into the river after they were dead, as there was no water in their lungs. Given Benno's strong and muscular physique, he was able to overpower his elderly parents without much difficulty. After his parents' bodies were found, Benno admitted that he was involved in their deaths. On the night of the incident, he had an argument with Peter. Benno tried to avoid the argument by locking himself in his room, but his father barged in and continued the argument. In a fit of rage, Benno attacked his father with a rope and strangled him. When Laura heard the noise and went upstairs, he feared that she would call the police, so he strangled her as well. Although his confession seemed credible, his motives seemed too weak to justify such a brutal act. Benno explained that his relationship with his parents had become increasingly strained in the months leading up to the incident, marked by frequent arguments after he moved back in with them. Benno had begun paying rent at his father's request. However, due to the constant arguments, his father decided that it would be best if Benno moved out. He began to encourage his son to rent his own apartment, but Benno refused. To pressure him to move, his father increased the rent to €700, which Benno considered excessive and unfair. That evening, Peter called him a loser for spending too much time on the computer and forced him to walk the dog. Another argument broke out. This conflict escalated into a tragic situation. Benno claims that his father was the first to confront him, trying to kick him out of the house. As a result, Benno felt he had no choice but to defend himself. The investigation revealed that immediately after the murder, Benno began to create an alibi. He called his mother's cell phone, pretending to go looking for her. After the murder, he asked Martina to wash his clothes to erase any evidence. Although she handed the washed clothes over to the police, no incriminating marks were found on them. Police believe that his efforts to conceal the evidence indicate a deliberate act. Not only did Benno understand what he was doing, but he also tried to avoid consequences for this brutal crime. Benno attempted to explain his actions by claiming that he was mentally disturbed and affected by the attack. However, his calm demeanor and careful efforts to conceal evidence of the crime showed that he was fully aware of his actions. After his arrest, psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he had a personality disorder characterized by narcissism and social problems. He had recently had frequent sudden outbursts of anger, which doctors attributed to his steroid use. Benno began taking additional medication. This led to a significant deterioration in his mental state due to hormonal changes, leading to increased aggression and a complete loss of self-control. Maid said that he would often attack her when angry and was often violent with other family members. On one occasion, she suffered multiple bruises as a result of his aggression. Even as a child, Benno tried to strangle her, but their parents were present at the time. In 2020, Benno entered a relationship with a girl named Nadine, and they moved to Germany together. A friend noted that at first, Benno was very attentive and caring. However, over time, his behavior became controlling, showing signs of selfishness and abusive tendencies. He tried to create distance between Nadine and her family, isolating her from her parents and friends, leaving her to spend most of her time alone. Things got worse when in June 2020, Nadine discovered that Benno had used her credit card without permission and stolen money from her account. This betrayal prompted Nadine to end the relationship. She called Benno's parents and insisted that they pick up their son from her apartment. His parents had to drive to pick him up. Just a day after their return, Benno made amends with Nadine, promising to pay her back and asking her parents to let him go home to Nadine. While Nadine was at work, he sent her a selfie showing him covered in blood. Benno claimed he had gotten into a fight with a friend named Dean. However, Dean was in another part of town at the time and did not see Benno. Benno sent some of the photos to his mother, Laura, who was concerned. She contacted a friend for advice. The friend suggested that Benno could be dangerous and advised Laura not to go to his apartment alone. Laura suspected that Benno's mental health had deteriorated due to his use of anabolic steroids. Benno was eventually taken away, and it was discovered that he had been self-harming due to hallucinations. After this incident, Nadine decided not to see him again, but he was discharged after only 3 days. During his stay, doctors did not have enough time to carry out all the necessary tests to diagnose his condition. It was suspected that Benno was schizophrenic and his family insisted on further testing, but he refused and began taking medication for schizophrenia. By the time Benno's trial began, he had been diagnosed with acute polymorphic psychotic disorder rather than schizophrenia. This misdiagnosis meant that he was taking the wrong medication, which likely worsened his mental condition. While on steroids, he was taking a dangerous cocktail of drugs that affected his behavior. Immediately before the murder, Benno was released from the psychiatric hospital and returned home. During this time, his mother became extremely concerned for his safety. She hid all the knives in the house and locked the doors at night. She believed that as long as she did not provoke him, everything would be fine, so she tried to avoid arguments and limit her interactions with him. Unfortunately, this did not protect her from a tragic end. On November 19, 2022, Benno Numair was sentenced to life in prison. However, his lawyer quickly appealed the decision, arguing that Benno was insane due to a combination of negative factors that worsened his mental condition. To support the defense's claims, several independent medical assessments were conducted, which found him mentally stable. The prosecution pointed out that Benno acted deliberately, as he tried to create an alibi and conceal his actions. Just minutes after the murder, he called his girlfriend, pretending to be worried about his parents' absence. He ruthlessly deceived those around him, sending messages to his deceased mother, deceiving his sister and neighbors, all to escape justice. After the retrial, Benno's life sentence was upheld and remains in effect. The murders of Peter and Laura received considerable media attention in Italy and caused widespread public fear. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tracy Roberts. In 1998, the Tracy Roberts family relocated from Chicago to the small town of Early, Iowa. The couple, Tracy and Michael, were in their second marriages and each had a son from previous relationships. Tracy was American, while Michael was originally from Australia. They were seen as a respectable young family by the local community. Michael was a computer expert who ran an IT business from home with many innovative ideas he aimed to pursue. Tracy is an active and sociable housewife who enjoys sports. The couple met online and got married just 18 days after meeting in person. They have since had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and appear to be a very happy family. Many people admired Michael's determination, including his neighbor Mona, a real estate broker with whom they had completed several successful transactions. Mona was eager to continue working with Michael. She said that her 20-year-old son, Dustin, was very private and had a hard time keeping a job. He had tried many different positions but had not been able to hold any for long. Michael suggested that help Dustin discover his strengths. Later, he began teaching Dustin the basics of business. He took him on trips and supported him in attending church. Michael was generally seen as kind, pleasant, and empathetic, while his wife was regarded as sweet and sociable. They raised 3 children together, with Tracy managing the household and children while Michael focused on work, often traveling for business. However, an unexpected situation happened to Tracy's family. On the evening of December 13, 2001, in the town of Early, Tracy was in the kitchen preparing dinner with her children. While the food was being heated, she was also bathing her 1-year-old daughter upstairs. Meanwhile, her 2 older boys, ages 3 and 11, were watching television in the older boy's bedroom. Suddenly, the boys were startled by a piercing scream from their mother. The eldest, Bert, rushed to see what was happening. He saw Tracy trying to enter the room, but someone grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back into the hallway. Holding her baby daughter, Tracy managed to hand her over to Bert before a struggle with the attacker ensued. Tracy slammed the door shut behind her, and the boys could hear the sounds of a struggle and their mother's muffled cries for help. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Bert listened as the noises escalated. Then, after a brief silence, a shot rang out. During the attack, Tracy managed to defend herself against the criminals. One was killed, and the other escaped. Bert called 911 around 7 p.m., reporting that strangers had broken into their home and attacked his mother. Police officers took the call seriously and rushed to the address. It was unclear what had happened to Tracy and her 3 children at that time. Paramedics then arrived to find the children sobbing and Tracy repeatedly shouting that an intruder was still upstairs and pointing towards the stairs. However, as per protocol, paramedics could not enter the house until police had confirmed that the house was secure. The police arrived and went up to the 2nd floor where they found a young man lying dead in a pool of blood. There was no one else in the room. Tracy was quickly placed in an ambulance by a doctor and taken to the nearest medical center. The scene revealed a shocking crime. The entire family was overwhelmed and confused by the situation. The police began an investigation to shed light on this complicated situation. The small town where the incident occurred was a quiet and peaceful community of about 500 residents, all of whom knew each other well. The police began their investigation by questioning Bert, the eldest son. Bert had witnessed an attack on his mother. The attacker had pulled her hair back. Stunned, the boy knew he had to act to protect himself and the other children, so he grabbed a baseball bat, ready to fight off anyone who entered his room. When the chaos died down, he could only hear his mother breathing heavily. Finally, he heard the voices of 2 men outside starting to bang on the door. In fear, the boy began to scream, trying to scare the intruders away. Outside, the men shouted about having guns, and then several shots were fired. Suddenly, his mother opened the door. Bert was relieved that it was finally over. He then called 911. After hearing about the incident, Mona rushed to the scene. She was looking for her 20-year-old son, Dustin, a family friend. His car was parked in a private driveway, but when she arrived, the entire area, including Dustin's car, was cordoned off. She was not allowed into Tracy's house. Mona asked the officers about her son's condition, but they told her that he was dead. Dustin was found lying in a pool of blood near a 2nd-floor bedroom. Tracy had shot him during a struggle. The police did not share any further information with Mona. Tracy woke up in a hospital 20 kilometers from her home. She had injuries to her neck that suggested she had been strangled. Tracy told the police what had happened that night. While she was bathing her daughter on the 2nd floor, she heard noises downstairs. Thinking that her husband had returned early from a business trip, she went down to check. But she discovered 2 men. When they started to go upstairs, Tracy quickly took her daughter to Bert's room and left the 3 children in the room. She then tried to enter the room and close the door, but one of the men grabbed her hair and dragged her into the hallway. Then one of the attackers used her jeans to strangle her. During the struggle, Tracy lost consciousness and the attackers lost focus. When she regained consciousness, she heard screaming outside the door. Realizing this was her chance to escape, she got up and ran to the gun safe next to the bed in the master bedroom. Although the attackers chased her, she managed to turn a few numbers and retrieve a gun. Tracy aimed at them and pulled the trigger, but nothing happened because the safety was still on. The attackers were caught off guard, allowing her to fire again after removing the safety. The loud bang stunned her, and she continued to fire at the attackers until the room filled with smoke. Tracy didn't see the criminals, but she heard someone running away from the house. One of the criminals fell, while the other managed to escape. She also heard her frightened children calling her name, so she rushed into the room and opened the door. In a moment of panic, her son swung a bat at her, trying to protect himself, and she narrowly avoided being hit. The most important thing was that the children were safe. As the smoke cleared in the main bedroom, Tracy saw Dustin, a 20-year-old, lying on the floor but still alive. He began to get up, and in her shock, she grabbed the gun and ordered him to stay down, desperate for everything to stop. She yelled at him not to move, but Dustin, who was the son of her friend Mona, didn't listen. He stood up and approached her. worried for her and the children's safety. She fired several shots, and Dustin fell to his death. Tracy recounted that earlier that day, Dustin visited their home. When he discovered that her husband was away on a business trip, he lingered on the porch for a long time, seemingly unwilling to leave. His behavior was unusual, and Tracy ultimately had to shut the door in his face. The Tracy described a second participant in the crime as tall, with dark hair, around 30 years old, but she never saw his face. That evening, Tracy's husband, Michael, was on a business trip in Minneapolis. It was unclear why Dustin, whom Michael was helping, would attack Tracy and their children. The second killer was still at large, raising fears that he might return for revenge. This left Tracy feeling fearful, she unable to sleep because she was worried about her family's safety. The police had a hard time identifying the second suspect, based only on the vague description provided by Tracy. They began investigating Dustin's social connections to determine who might have accompanied him to Tracy's family home. Many people consider Tracy a hero. She gave many interviews to journalists. In front of the cameras, she and her husband, Michael, held hands, and she calmly said that she did what she had to do to protect her family, and the whole hall applauded. Many people thought that her actions were justified. Tracy was brave, she could protect not only herself but also her children. The police were wary of accepting anyone's testimony without evidence, so they began a thorough investigation of the events surrounding the case, finding the story unconvincing. Mona was going through the most difficult time of her life and was heartbroken. To her, the circumstances of her son's murder, as Tracy described them, were meaningless. She was haunted by nightmares of the attack that took her son's life. Mona, the mother of the young man who was shot, spoke to the media about her shock over the incident. She described Dustin as a kind person who had never shown aggression and had no criminal history. There was no reason for him to attack the Tracy family. However, Dustin had to see a psychologist with his mother. He had difficulty making friends at school, was often bullied, and was excluded from parties and celebrations. Despite seeing many doctors, they gave him different diagnoses without clear answers. Could his social difficulties lead to a moment of loss of control? Tracy told the police that she had always feared Dustin. She felt extremely unsafe, even around her husband, and she tried to avoid any encounters with Dustin. Under no circumstances would she let him be alone with the children because she believed he would harm them. Mona was shocked by these allegations. She had no idea that Tracy was facing such serious issues with her son. To Mona, everything seemed just the opposite. The police examined the crime scene and concluded that there was no clear motive for the violent attack. They suggested that it could only make sense if it had been planned as a robbery. The Tracy house contained many valuables, leading Tracy to believe that the young criminals aimed to steal cash or one of Michael's collectible weapons. However, the criminals' behavior did not resemble that of typical robbers. They ignored money and jewelry that were easily visible, and instead of trying to steal from Tracy while she was unconscious after being strangled, they focused solely on inflicting violence without any intent to sexually assault her. The police quickly identified a possible motive linked to Tracy and her husband. Not long before the home invasion, Tracy had experienced a traumatic incident. She was sexually assaulted by a dentist while under anesthesia. She regained consciousness during the assault, and the dentist attempted to silence her by promising to help her with her sexual problems and offering her $150,000 in compensation if she remained quiet. Tracy confided in her husband about this, and he urged her to report it to the police. Just 2 days after the dentist's attack on her, she was preparing to testify in court against her dentist, whom she was accusing of rape. He was likely the second person to invade her home, intending to silence her so she could not testify against him. However, police determined that the dentist had no connection to Dustin and had a solid alibi. He was at work at the time. Later, the Tracy recalled another individual who might have wanted her dead. His name was John Pittman, Tracy's first husband. They met while studying medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. John was a fourth-year student interning at Chicago Clinical Hospital, and 19-year-old Tracy was in her first year of radiology. John was very controlling and aggressive, but Tracy was accustomed to such behavior after growing up with a domineering father, so she considered it normal. She married him, and they eventually moved to Denver, Colorado, where she gave birth to a son. As John tried to control every aspect of her life, she thought it was normal. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Tracy describes how he often abused her, especially during sex. Eventually, she grew tired of the physical violence, and they divorced. After the divorce, a custody battle began to take place. Bert revealed to his mother that his father had harassed him, leading to a contentious custody battle in court. Although there was no concrete evidence of harassment, Tracy was able to convince those present at the trial. Bert then lived with his mother. However, the long-running custody battle, which was still ongoing when the attack occurred, left John Pittman as a suspect. Even young Bert believed his father may have been involved in the attack. The police contacted John's colleagues in Virginia, where he lived, to confirm whether he had an alibi during the time of the crime. They found that he had a solid alibi. He was working at a clinic when the crime occurred. John denied any involvement, and there was no evidence against him. At that time, he was a successful plastic surgeon with an excellent reputation. His acquaintances found it hard to believe that John could harm his son or kill his ex-wife, whom he had not been involved with for a long time. However, John had not been cleared yet and remained a suspect. Months passed without any progress in the case, and Tracy grew increasingly anxious. She felt unsafe knowing that the second attacker was still at large, fearing that he might return to take revenge on her. Meanwhile, the police began investigating the new suspect, Tracy's second husband, Michael. Further investigation revealed that their marriage had long since deteriorated, and the emotional connection between them had faded. Some speculated that Michael may have wanted to get rid of Tracy, a theory that received considerable support from those around them. Bert, Tracy's eldest son, revealed a disturbing truth about his stepfather. The man was very strict and often punished Bert severely for even minor infractions. Meanwhile, Tracy did not address her husband's aggressive behavior or protect her children. It is possible that Tracy had become accustomed to this type of treatment from a young age and did not realize it was a problem. Michael's behavior was noted by the police during a hospital visit where he visited his surviving relatives. His reaction seemed to be genuine shock at finding them still alive, suggesting that this outcome was not what he had wanted. Michael had a strong alibi. He was in another city on business. This was confirmed by CCTV footage. He was later given a lie detector test, but failed it and appeared to be hiding something. The police suspected he may have been involved in planning the attack. He did not inform his wife about the failed lie detector test. Tracy eventually discovered the truth about the lie detector test. Tracy became increasingly paranoid, believing that both her husband and his friend were conspiring against her to gain sole custody of their child. She shared her suspicions with the police chief, citing a dream in which Michael mentioned the plot. Tracy believed that her husband was indeed involved in the case. The police began investigating Michael and discovered that his IT business was struggling and he was in large debt. However, the couple held multi-million-dollar life insurance policies, which may have motivated Michael to eliminate Tracy to solve his financial problems. Additionally, he had a close relationship with Dustin, which may have led him to convince the young man to help him. Despite these theories, there was no concrete evidence linking Michael to any wrongdoing. Tracy and Michael's relationship became increasingly strained. In 2004, 3 years after the attack, they divorced. At the time, police had not found enough evidence to arrest Michael. After the divorce, Tracy and her children moved away. She changed her home, her job, and even her name to escape and protect herself from potential threats. Meanwhile, her friend Mona also moved to another city with her daughters. The tragedy not only affected Dustin's life, but also led to the death of his father a year later. On Thanksgiving Day 2002, Dustin's father chose to end his life at Dustin's grave. The father was devastated by his son's death, especially because of the judgmental looks from others who viewed Dustin as a dangerous criminal. Meanwhile, Mona, devastated by a series of losses, could not stop questioning what really happened the day her son arrived at Tracy's house. Mona refused to believe that he intended to hurt the people he admired. Michael's family was important to Dustin. He struggled with social interactions and felt safe and grateful to be with Michael, who understood him. The Mona intended to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Tracy Roberts to hold her accountable for Dustin's death and to uncover what happened that night. Mona lawyers launched their own investigation and discovered inconsistencies in Tracy's repeated accounts of the event. In one version, she claimed to have recognized Dustin immediately, while in another, she said she only learned his identity later. Additionally, she described shooting from different positions in her various retellings. Due to these discrepancies and the confusion surrounding the details, the lawyers concluded that her story was fabricated. On the day of the murder, Mona was busy shopping for Christmas. She called home to check if Dustin was up yet, as he had an important meeting scheduled. Her daughter answered and said that Dustin had left. She was relieved that Dustin was awake and going about his business. Later, Mona's nephew called to inform her that something had happened at Tracy's house. Mona rushed over, suspecting that Tracy and Michael had hurt each other, but she could not fathom that her son had been murdered. Mona mentioned that the day before the murder, Tracy had invited her son to her house to ask for help with something. Mona believed that this was Tracy's way of luring Dustin into a trap. She believed that Tracy was hiding something. However, no one paid attention to Mona's testimony until 7 years after the Roberts burglary. The same investigative team revisited the case and began to suspect that Tracy might not be the hero protecting her son, but a potential killer. There was no sign of forced entry or attempted robbery in the house. How could two people have broken in without leaving any evidence? Dustin had 9 gunshot wounds, indicating he had been shot at close range with no chance of survival, and there was no evidence of a second attack. The police decided to speak with Tracy's first husband, John. He described her as a monster, revealing that she had had bouts of aggression, including one time when she pointed a gun at him while threatening violence. She eventually fired a shot into the ceiling, prompting him to call the police. John discovered that Tracy was both aggressive and unfaithful. She drained their bank accounts. He even hired a private detective because he suspected she was cheating, and the detective confirmed that several of Tracy's lovers left their home while John was at work. Eventually, John filed for divorce because he began to fear Tracy. Concerned about their son growing up in such a toxic environment with an unstable mother, he fought for custody. This enraged Tracy, who tried to turn their son against John. A dentist was accused of raping Tracy during a dental appointment, but he claimed that she had been harassing him for a long time and was willing to prove it. His practice was equipped with cameras and the recordings supported his claim. It was revealed that Tracy, upon learning of this, had withdrawn her complaint against the dentist the day before the incident. Tracy's second husband, Michael, who she accused of being abusive and harassing her, denied all her allegations to police. He said Tracy was unfaithful. Michael claimed that he put up with these problems for the sake of his children but eventually decided to divorce her. He described himself as a strict father who never abused his wife and children and claimed that Tracy turned the children against him after their divorce. After the divorce, Michael moved to California to focus on his business. The Tracy seemed to slander everyone around her, presenting herself as a victim of abuse from the men in her life. However, the reality was quite the opposite. Police believed that her account of the events from December 13, 2001, was just another lie fabricated by Tracy. The police wanted to meet with Burt to gather more information, but Tracy not only moved to another state and changed her personal information, she also frequently changed her contact information. The police had to thoroughly review the entire list of evidence again. One significant item was an old computer discovered in the back seat of Dustin's car. Tracy believed this computer was crucial evidence in the robbery because it belonged to her husband. However, it was puzzling why Dustin would steal it when there were more valuable and easier to take items available in the house. Additionally, a pink notebook was found in which Dustin had written plans for the murder shortly before his death. The notes indicated that his mission included killing Tracy Roberts, and surprisingly, the person who ordered the assassination was Tracy's first husband, John. However, there was a strange detail in these notes. They contained so many specific details about events that Dustin could not have known before the attack, yet they were written in his own handwriting. It seemed that Dustin had written them under duress, possibly under threat. Dustin's mother did not recognize the pink notebook, which seemed more suited for a woman. Dustin disliked this color and would never have purchased such a notebook. He never kept diaries, and the only content in this notebook was a crime plan, which appeared unusual. It looked brand new and seemed to have been used only once for those notes. It suggested that Tracy might have given the notebook to someone to stage a crime. The latest investigation revealed that Dustin was not the attacker but Tracy's victim. It was also revealed that Tracy had been facing problems in her new town in Nebraska, where she had recently moved. She was charged with falsifying documents and false identity. 10 years after the murder, the police discovered the truth. On July 27, 2011, the police arrested Tracy. The memories of a friend who had helped Tracy clean out her house provided vital information. The friend knew about a notebook containing Dustin's confession. The police discovered that all of these statements had been recorded at Tracy's request. Police found no signs of an attack in the house. The wounds to her neck were self-inflicted, as evidenced by minor scratches that were not life-threatening. The claim that Dustin had struggled to stand up after being shot multiple times was clearly implausible. Forensic experts analyzed crime scene photographs and determined, based on blood spatter, that Dustin was still lying on the floor, with all the shots coming from above. This contradicted Tracy's version of events. The defense argued that Tracy was simply trying to protect her child. They said much of the evidence against her was circumstantial. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of Tracy's eldest son, Burt. He claimed that he heard men screaming and saw someone dragging his mother out the door. Burt also confirmed that the attacker told his mother that she was dead and warned that he would be next. He then saw a young man with a gunshot wound trying to get up, as his mother had described. However, the reliability of Burt's testimony has been questioned. Tracy initially mentioned that the nursery door was closed at the time, preventing Burt from witnessing the incident. The prosecution argued that Burt's account may have been influenced by his mother. The prosecution argued that Tracy killed Dustin to frame her husband, hoping to gain sole custody of their children and access to his money. This was considered the primary motive for the crime. That same day, Tracy confronted Dustin at gunpoint, forced him to write in a notebook, and then shot him. She then staged a scene to make it look like she had been attacked, inflicting minor injuries on herself and leaving a notebook and a computer in Dustin's car. A forensic expert later confirmed that her injuries were inconsistent with her being unconscious, further casting doubt on her testimony. After reviewing the evidence, the jury found Tracy Roberts guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tracy cried in court when she heard the verdict, but many people did not believe her tears, as they did not seem genuine. Again, she seemed to be acting. The situation was especially difficult for Bert, who was convinced that his mother had saved the lives of all her children that night and had been wrongly imprisoned. He continued to visit and support her. Years later, Tracy's second husband, Michael, with the approval of the guardianship agency, took the children back to Australia with his new wife. Tracy maintains her innocence and is currently serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility in Iowa. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Christy Johnson. Christy Johnson was born in 1981 in Santa Clara, California, USA. She lives with her parents, Teresa and Kirk Johnson. When she was a child, her family moved from California to Saugatuck, a small town in Michigan. Saugatuck is a quiet town with less than 1,000 residents. It seems like a safe place to build a happy future with an extremely low crime rate. The locals feel so safe that they don't even lock their doors. It's a tight-knit community where everyone knows each other. Christy has an older brother named Derek, who is just a few years older than her. Her parents later divorced, but they maintained a good relationship for the sake of their children. Christy and Derek took turns living with their father and mother as required by the custody agreement. As a result, Christy quickly took on household responsibilities. From the age of 12, she began helping her mother, including managing the family budget. Christy sought part-time work to gain independence and avoid having to ask her parents for money. Eventually, her brother Derek enlisted in the army and decided to pursue a career in the military. During this time, Christy was in high school. Christy is fun and interesting to talk to. She leads an active and healthy lifestyle. Christy enjoys sailing, surfing, and anything water-related. She also enjoys theater and is a member of a small acting club. In the winter, she works as a waitress at a local cafe. Her pleasant, polite, and sociable attitude attracts many customers. Christy grew increasingly eager to leave the small town of Saugatuck, as the peaceful environment there did not suit her. In 1999, she graduated from high school, finally having the freedom to begin forging her own path to success. After some reflection, Christy decided to begin her journey of exploring different cities, exploring different jobs. Initially, she moved in with her grandmother in the small resort town of Santa Maria. Population 100,000. Finding a job to support herself was important. She then worked as a systems administrator for an electric utility company and continued her education. Christy decided to enroll in the University of California, a 40-minute drive from her grandmother's home. Although she used her savings to buy a car, the daily commute proved difficult, so Christy looked for work closer to her studies. Christy got a part-time job with a film crew. Her experience working in a theater group helped her adjust to her new work environment. She was hired as an assistant on the set of a horror film, where she met people from Hollywood. She interacted with world-famous actors and directors and felt extremely happy. Christy was fascinated by the world of cinema. Inspired by this experience, she wanted to get more involved in the industry, so she enrolled in professional makeup courses taught by Hollywood makeup artists. After mastering these skills, she considered becoming a makeup artist on set and planned to move to Los Angeles. She eventually moved to Los Angeles, where many famous film studios were located. When she arrived in her new environment, she avoided parties and social gatherings. She had a boyfriend whom she met a few years ago. They kept in touch despite the distance, and later he moved in with her. They rented an apartment together in Los Angeles. Since 2002, they have been struggling financially. Although it was not easy, Christy persevered in finding a stable job. Christy still had not found a steady job. so most of her income came from her boyfriend. Then their relationship deteriorated. Christy confided in her mother that their arguments often ended with him physically abusing her. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship. Her mother began looking for a new place for Christy to live. Eventually, Christy left her boyfriend, moved into a small apartment, and continued her studies. Her father supported her financially, hoping that she would find her way. By November 2002, Christy had found a job at a cell phone company. Although the job did not match her career goals or salary expectations, her mother then found her a new home close to her workplace in Santa Monica, a town near Los Angeles, where Christy shared a living space with 2 other girls. During this time, she transferred to Santa Monica College. Christy's Hollywood dreams did not come true. Her relationship ended and she started over. Despite this, she remained determined and continued to pursue her dreams. On February 15, 2003, Christy was scheduled to attend a party. Before that, she went to a shopping mall and had a long phone conversation with her mother about her future plans. This turned out to be the last time the family heard from her. The next day, February 16th, Christy's mother tried to call her daughter. At first, she was not worried, thinking that Christy might be resting or working and unable to answer the phone. However, when she received no response, she became more worried. By 9 a.m. the next day, Christy's mother contacted her workplace, where Christy was known to be punctual and reliable. Christy's manager confirmed that she had not shown up for work. A coworker told her that Christy was supposed to be attending a party. Christy's mother searched her daughter's social media but found no useful information about the event. Although Christy shared many photos of her life, she had not posted anything about the party. The mother also reviewed Christy's bank account transactions and noticed that there had been no activity since Christy stopped communicating. Worried, she called all the hospitals, but Christy was not admitted to any of them. On February 17th, her mother reported Christy missing to the Santa Monica Police Department. Police investigated whether she had been involved in any traffic accidents but found no clues. Friends who lived with her reported that they had not heard anything unusual after she went missing. Police contacted her ex-boyfriend, Todd. They considered the possibility that he might have harmed her, but he denied seeing her. Neighbors said they saw Christy on Saturday, February 15th, on her way to a party, but they did not know who she was with or where the party was. The police had to get at least something connected with the Christy, so her car, a white oil Mint, was sought. While interviewing her mother, they learned more about her ex-boyfriend, Todd, and her new boyfriend, Lucas. However, Christy's mother had very little information about Lucas. She didn't even know his last name, which complicated the investigation. It had been 48 hours since Christy was reported missing, a critical time frame in which police feared she might not be alive. They began checking cell phone records and discovered that Christy's last outgoing call was made at 5:34 p.m. on February 15th. She had called the helpline at 411, which could indicate that she was in distress and seeking assistance with an address or phone number. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes, suggesting it was important to the investigation, but specific details could not be obtained because the calls were not recorded. After that call, Christy's phone battery died, with her last known location being near Ventura Boulevard. Police reached out to the media to assist in the investigation. News outlets quickly began to cover Christy's disappearance. Police searched Christy's apartment for clues and discovered a receipt from a lingerie store dated February 15th, the day she went missing. They also learned that Christy had been in contact with Todd, her ex, despite his violent tendencies. She last visited him on February 7th. Police discovered a key clue while reviewing Christy's emails. On February 13th, Christy sent a message to the event manager expressing her intention to purchase tickets. However, she was told that all the tickets were sold out and was placed on a special waiting list. This tactic is often used by event organizers to deceive customers and then sell tickets at a higher price. The police then found Christie's new boyfriend, Lucas, and interviewed him. He reported that he last saw Christie on February 14th, the day she went missing. They spent the evening watching a movie before saying goodbye. He passed a polygraph test, had a solid alibi, and did not raise any suspicions with the police. Next, police spoke with Christie's ex-boyfriend, Todd, who also had an alibi. He was confirmed by multiple witnesses to be out of town. Police focused in particular on the party Christie attended when she went missing. Police contacted the organizers of the event and were surprised to learn that Christie had never purchased a ticket and did not attend the party. This raised questions about where she might have gone instead. To reconstruct the timeline of that evening, police reviewed transactions made with Christie's bank card. This investigation revealed the stores she had visited that day. Police then searched for surveillance camera footage that might provide details or clues about her activities. The police then received a call from a woman named Susan Murphy, who reported seeing a suspicious person. She recounted her encounter with a man named Victor Lawrence Paleologos at a store, where Victor said he was a representative of a film company that was casting for a new James Bond film. Susan said he asked her to audition for the role of Bond's girlfriend, complimented her appearance, and tried to convince her to join. Feeling uncomfortable with him, she eventually turned down his offer. To ensure her safety, her husband, a former police officer, went to see Victor. He spoke to Victor to try to learn more about his intentions, but Victor fled without providing any useful information. Susan later investigated Victor further and discovered that he had lied, that he had absolutely nothing to do with the film. Victor likely fabricated this information to meet beautiful women, although his motives remain unclear. Although Susan is safe, Victor is still at large and could pose a danger, making it important to verify this information and locate him. They then decide to interview employees in the store. Police described Victor, who had a reputation for harassing attractive women, in these conversations. At one store, a clerk reported seeing a person matching the police description but was unable to provide any useful details. The search for Christie intensified. Police deployed dogs and volunteers to the area where she was last seen. Volunteers searched for Christie and her car. Although police had received multiple reports of sightings of a similar vehicle, those reports turned out to be false. On February 24th, police received a crucial tip. They located her car, a white Mazda Miata, in a parking lot near the shopping center where Christie had been shopping. A forensic scientist then arrived to conduct a thorough examination of the car, collecting fingerprints and other evidence found inside. A water bottle was found in the back seat, and Christie's cell phone was found in the front seat. The police encountered an unexpected revelation when they spoke with the parking attendant. He recalled an incident involving the car in question. The vehicle arrived at 17:45, but it was already reserved for another customer. A man exited the car, and when informed of the reservation, he reacted aggressively. He threw the car keys at the attendant and left without further explanation. Sadly, there were no surveillance cameras in the parking area, making it impossible to identify the driver. With no leads, the police returned to examining the Christie's purchases from that day and were taken aback. On the day she disappeared, Christie had bought a set of clothes that matched the description Susan had given when Victor asked her to prepare for the casting. He instructed Susan to buy the shortest black miniskirt possible, along with a white shirt, stockings, and shoes. All these items were purchased using Christie's bank card, leading the police to suspect that this was not merely a coincidence. This suggests that Christie may have fallen for a scammer, similar to what happened to Susan, although fortunately she was with her husband. Unfortunately, there was no news of Victor, and the police had no way to contact him. police once again spoke to Christie's housemates. They recalled that Christie had indeed attended and tried out the role, although they could not recall the specifics. During the discussion, they noted that it was related to James Bond. They mentioned that Christie was very excited about the event, and she had gone to get ready in costume. Christie was worried about being late for the try out the role, which was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Police reviewed the camera footage several times to locate Victor, and unfortunately, the footage was of poor quality and they were unable to identify his facial features. However, with the help of witness statements, police were able to create a composite sketch of the prime suspect in Christie's disappearance. By February 26, the sketch was complete. An experienced police officer familiar with the case identified the suspect as Victor Lawrence Paleologus, who had just been paroled on January 20, 2003, after serving a sentence for sexual assault. Victor often used tactics like promising casting calls for parties to lure his victims. This approach worked for him, especially near the Walk of Fame, where many young women who come to Los Angeles to dream of Hollywood make them easy targets for predators. Victor first received a suspended sentence for attacking a girl. In 1998, he attempted to rape Katie Devina, presenting himself as Brian, a film producer. He received a very short sentence for this crime. There are also indications that Victor had embezzled money from a company before. In addition, several other women came forward as victims of his attempted rapes, but the police reports did not result in any consequences for him due to lack of evidence. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend in her own home. Although this was also an unsuccessful sexual assault, he stole money and jewelry from her apartment. This crime was largely overlooked, resulting in only a suspended sentence. He then seduced a girl named Heather, as he had done with others, and convinced her to dress in a way that pleased him. He then attempted to tie her up and rape her, but she escaped. Victor was sentenced to 2 years in prison and was paroled on January 20, 2003, just 3 weeks before Christie went missing. After his release, Victor quickly returned to his previous criminal activities. By the time police began searching for him, he had been arrested for stealing a BMW X5 in Beverly Hills and attempting to sell it using false documents. During a search of his wallet after his arrest, officers discovered a wallet containing several stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents. The police showed Susan a photo of Victor. At the police station, Susan quickly recognized Victor in a lineup, despite his attempts to disguise himself by hunching over, changing the shape of his arms, and changing his hairstyle. Susan's husband, who had tried to stop the attacker, also confirmed Victor's identity. However, a security guard at the parking lot where Christie's car was found could not recognize Victor, as he had only seen him briefly in the darkness. Victor denied any involvement in Christie's disappearance and insisted on having a lawyer present before speaking to the police. Victor expressed concern that the authorities might be trying to frame him because he was on parole. Police kept collecting evidence against Victor, and a new witness soon came forward. A realtor had been working with Victor for several weeks and noticed his unusual behavior while looking for homes priced up to $700,000. They visited multiple properties each day, and during one visit, they experienced an incident involving lost documents and keys that suggested Victor might be involved in theft. After the realtor saw Victor's photo in a police report, they recognized him as a possible suspect. The realtor recalled Victor behaving nervously during their last meeting, which happened around the time Christie disappeared. Additionally, while viewing a house, Victor tested the soundproofing by shouting from the bathroom, raising police suspicions that he was scouting for a potential crime scene. The police investigated all the homes Victor had visited, paying special attention to one where Christie's phone last registered a signal. They searched for evidence or Christie's body but found nothing. However, when they searched Victor's apartment, they discovered unsettling photos of women in revealing clothing. After 12 days of investigation, Christie's family remained hopeful for her safe return, while Victor was uncooperative, denying any involvement but acknowledging that he had seen Christie before she disappeared. Victor was born in 1962 in Pennsylvania as the youngest of 5 brothers in a family. He attended college, earned a bachelor's degree, and then moved to Los Angeles for graduate studies. He was married from 1990 to 1993, during which time there were allegations that he attempted to poison his wife after she reported his business failures. Feeling aggrieved by the world, Victor turned to crime, and his obsession with attractive women led him to violence. On the night Christie went missing, Victor and his lawyer provided an alibi backed by witnesses, stating he was at a restaurant with a friend. Nevertheless, police believed he might have had enough time to abduct another victim despite his alibi. On March 1st, a new witness contacted the police, saying that he had seen Christie on February 15th. She was near his house, asking for directions to a mansion that looked like a castle. His wife overheard the conversation and gave Christie directions to the location. Christie later called the information desk, confirming that she was indeed looking for a house that looked like a castle, which also fit the type of house Victor was considering because of its soundproofing. While the police were following up on this lead, something else important happened. On March 3, 2003, 4 teenagers hiking in the Hollywood Hills discovered something unusual about 100 meters below them. At first, they thought it was a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was a human body. Without cell phones, they rushed to report their discovery to a woman walking her dog on the road. The woman then went to where the teenagers pointed. She saw the victim's legs were tied and covered with a blue cloth. The woman was wearing a gray hoodie, her hands were tied behind her back, and there was a hair tie around her right wrist. She immediately called the police. Rescue workers and police quickly arrived at the scene and, after much effort, were able to remove the body from the Hollywood Hills. The medical examiner identified the body as that of Christie Johnson. Police notified Christie's parents of the tragic news, and they were devastated by the loss. Christie's body had extensive bruising and abrasions. The condition of the body was poor due to significant decomposition from exposure to heat for several days, along with a rainy day. Her face was particularly unrecognizable due to the severity of her injuries. Christie's ear was torn, and there were significant bruises on her head and neck. These injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma and strangulation, which were determined to be the cause of death. Police believed that Victor was responsible for the murder, but they needed to prove that he did not have an alibi for the time of Christie's murder. To do this, police spoke to his friend Joy, who mentioned having dinner with him that night. Upon questioning, Joy stated that they met much later than the time of Christie's death. Joy stated that Victor arrived late for their meeting, around midnight, even though they had planned to meet earlier. Victor had scratches on his face, which he attributed to minor injuries sustained while moving. The police have pieced together the events leading up to Christie's disappearance. The man, who frequently targeted victims at a shopping center, approached Christie, a young girl he found attractive. He claimed to be working in the film industry and invited her to audition for the role of James Bond's love interest, presenting himself convincingly. Flattering Christie, he insisted she was perfect for the part, playing on her ambitions and making it hard for her to refuse. He arranged to meet her at a property he was visiting with a realtor, claiming it was for the audition. Christie prepared for the meeting and wore the outfit he requested. When they met, she became the target of his attack. She tried to scratch his face to fight back. Victor overpowered her, raped her, and killed her to prevent her from reporting the crime. He first struck her on the head and then strangled her, believing she was dead before leaving her body in the Hollywood Hills. Tragically, the blunt force trauma and strangulation didn't lead to her death immediately. She lost consciousness, and he assumed she was dead. When he discarded her onto the rocks from a significant height, she sustained even more injuries. Finally, she regained consciousness and died slowly. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney charged Victor with kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. The defense was well prepared to fight for his freedom, as there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution faced a challenging task, relying on compelling arguments from forensic experts. The defense challenged the estimated time of death, citing the presence of insects on the body. However, the similarities between this case and previous attacks attributed to the same criminal. Preparations for the trial took time, and Victor finally appeared in court in July 2006. The defense argued that the prosecutor's office had little to no direct evidence linking Victor to the victim, as there was no DNA, fingerprints, or surveillance camera footage. This lack of evidence was attributed to the fact that the body was discovered 2 weeks after the disappearance, by which time it had decomposed significantly, destroying any potential evidence. However, the prosecution gained the advantage of testifying about who had accused Victor of harassment. They portrayed him as a skilled manipulator. It was clear to everyone that the victor was responsible for Christie's death. To avoid the death penalty, he decided to negotiate with the prosecution and plead guilty to a lesser charge. The only remaining step was for Christie's family to accept this deal. By that point, the trial had been ongoing for 3 weeks with little progress, and its outcome was uncertain. After enduring so much pain, the victim's family was willing to compromise to ensure justice was served. However, on the day the verdict was announced, the victor submitted an 11-page request to the judge, asking to withdraw his guilty plea. Fortunately, it was too late for him to change his mind. Victor Lawrence Paleologos was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Bodhisattva Potter. This is a story about 2 lovers who met in school and wanted to spend all their free time together, believing their love would last forever. However, they were unaware of how brutally their happiness could be shattered by an unexpected tragedy. Bodhisattva Potter was born in 1991 in Newport Beach, California, to Rick Potter and Scherzer. Bodhisattva also has an older brother named Zen. At the time of Bodhisattva and Zen's birth, both parents were in their 30s, and soon after, the family experienced significant career growth. Scherzer is a psychologist who specializes in working with autistic children. Her husband is a psychotherapist and also provides medical consultation. From a young age, Bodhisattva was very intelligent and kind. She was humble and maintained good relationships with everyone around her. All her teachers recognized her intellectual talent. Bodhisattva was also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and basketball, and she pursued these hobbies and won several awards for her achievements. She also played the piano and sang. Her parents divorced in 1998. At the time, Bodhisattva was 8 years old and living in Newport Beach with her mother and brother. They moved to Hollandale, California, a small desert town with a population of just 6,000, about 2 hours away from their old home. Hollandale is an isolated community with a strong sense of community, with 2 large lakes that make it feel like an oasis in the desert. The town has about 2,000 homes and a well-developed sports and recreation infrastructure, making it feel like a small resort. Bodhisattva was accepted into the Lewis Center, an academy whose curriculum prepares students for entry into top universities. At this time, Zen moved back in with his father, and Bodhisattva stayed with his mother. Despite the distance, the 2 brothers often spent weekends and holidays together. Initially, Bodhisattva and her mother rented a house. In 2004, when she was 12 years old, her mother bought a plot of land near a lake to build her dream home. Bodhisattva was actively involved in the design of the new house, but the construction process took longer than expected due to high costs, so they continued to live in the rented house during this time. On Bodhisattva's 13th birthday, she gradually became more mature. She began to seek independence. Her mother recognized this change and allowed her daughter more freedom. Over time, Bodhisattva became interested in Hollywood and dreamed of becoming a film producer. By 2007, she was in high school and began dating Christopher Cody Thompson, her first love. They were a perfect match, sharing many interests in film, psychology, and architecture, and they enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings together. Cody, born in 1989 in Victorville, California, is 2 years older than Bodhisattva. He has 2 older sisters, Sarah and Katie. Cody is a young man passionate about nature and cycling, and he enjoys restoring custom bikes with his father. At the time he met Bodhisattva, Cody had been working as a teaching assistant for 2 years. People generally describe him as friendly and outgoing. Scherzer was surprised to find out that her daughter had a boyfriend. She felt that it was too early for her daughter to start a relationship and was prepared to intervene if necessary. However, as a psychologist, she realized that she needed to accompany her daughter. She understood that her daughter was growing up and that this journey could not be controlled by restrictions alone. Initially, she considered Cody to be a bit rude, which made her feel uncomfortable. However, as they began to communicate, they found common ground. The Scherzer soon realized that her initial judgment about Cody was wrong. He turned out to be a good person. She felt more secure about her daughter's relationship. Cody graduated from high school and began working for the family business, which helped him become financially independent. He was able to support himself and even buy his own car. He has a passion for exploring old buildings, so he scheduled a visit to an old military bunker that had been repurposed and is now open to the public. Initially, the place attracted many adventure lovers. Over time, it became a popular place for teenage parties. However, the place was not safe. The bunker was often used by addicts to do drugs, and people also came here to practice shooting for themselves. Despite these risks, Cody still wanted to visit because of its uniqueness. Many of his friends knew about it but disapproved of his hobby. However, Cody was attracted to the place and liked the feeling of being in a secret location. In December 2007, after turning 18, Cody planned to take his 16-year-old girlfriend, Bodhi, to the bunker to show her the place they both loved for exploring abandoned sites. Excited by the idea, Bodhi invited her mother to join them. Her mother, Scherzer, objected to the idea. She was shocked by the plans the couple had made. Scherzer warned that the place could be dangerous and forbade Bodhisattva from going there. Although Bodhisattva understood her mother's concerns, her rebellious teenage spirit got the better of her. She did not fully understand the dangers of the place. Despite her mother's warnings, she was determined to explore the bunker. In January 2008, Scherzer was in Newport on business. While her mother was away, Bodhisattva had a few days free to do whatever she wanted. She decided to take the opportunity to visit the shelter. At the time, Cody had planned to take 30 people from the school to the abandoned shelter in the woods. To get to the abandoned building, she asked her friend Andrew to drive her there. He picked Bodhisattva up from home and drove her there on the evening of Friday, January 4, 2008. Bodhisattva hid her intentions from her mother and brother. She told her brother that she was going to see their mother, while she assured her mother that she would stay home with her brother. Bodhisattva was clever enough to make her story sound believable, and her family believed her. On the evening of January 4th, when she and Andrew arrived at the bunker, several cars were there, including those of Cody and his friends. Everyone was enjoying the music and having a good time. Their group was quite large, making them feel safe. The teens explored the empty bunker and had fun until about 4 a.m. When everyone started to leave, Cody and Bodhisattva decided to stay and sleep overnight in his car under the stars, taking advantage of the time when their mother was not there. Bodhisattva and Cody fell asleep until Cody received a call from one of his friends. The friend had lost his iPad, but Cody found it in a car and promised to return it at their next meeting. After the call, Cody went back to sleep and did not contact anyone again. Around 4:30 a.m., Scherzer woke up with a sharp pain in her chest, feeling as if she had been stabbed. She felt worried about her daughter, but decided to wait until 6:30 to call Bodhisattva. It was their family's habit to start the day with a short conversation to ask how everyone was doing. However, when Scherzer called, Bodhisattva did not answer. Scherzer tried to call her daughter, but the call was unsuccessful. She then contacted Zen and discovered Bodhisattva's lie. Zen thought her sister was with their mother, while the mother believed Bodhisattva was with Zen. They discovered that Bodhisattva had gone with Andrew, who had picked her up from home and had taken her somewhere, leaving her family worried and angry. Scherzer also tried to contact Andrew, but was unsuccessful. Scherzer, who was in another city at the time, decided to contact the police. At that time, Bodhisattva had not been reached for about 10 hours, but the police explained that it was not enough time to officially classify her as missing. The police initially thought that Bodhisattva had simply run away or gone out with friends. Meanwhile, her mother felt helpless because she was far away. Scherzer's worries grew when she called Cody's mother, who had also not seen her son since the night before and was extremely worried. They began contacting all of their son's friends and discovered that the two had attended a party at an abandoned bunker the night before, and no one had heard from them since. This was Bodhisattva's mother's worst nightmare, as she considered the location to be one of the dangerous. Zen and his friends quickly arrived at the location and found Cody's car parked outside an abandoned building. Both the driver's and passenger doors were wide open, which added to their worries as there was no one inside. Zen and his friends grabbed flashlights and entered the building. The search continued for several hours, with them splitting up and searching different areas of the bunker. Eventually, one of the friends discovered Cody in a room of the abandoned building. He showed no signs of life. The most alarming detail was that Cody was missing an eye. And Bodhisattva was still missing. Zen immediately called 911 to report the incident. Around 3 p.m. that day, Cody's mother received a call informing her that her son had been shot. Upon hearing this, Bodhisattva's mother was extremely panicked, although she still held on to a faint hope that her daughter was alive. She then quickly went to the shelter to look for her daughter. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene, but the journey took a long time. When the police arrived, they searched the bunker area, and some police were outside to question those who had witnessed the incident. The bunker was complex and confusing, like a maze. Inside, it was so dark that even the light of a few lanterns could not help the police gather information. The teenagers who found Cody's body helped the police locate him. He had a serious gunshot wound to the head, which caused him to lose an eye and eventually die. Cody's body was removed from the bunker, but the search did not end there. Because it was so dark inside, the police had to wait for generators and lights to be installed inside the bunker. Later, near where Cody's body was found, police also discovered Bodhisattva's body in the hallway. She had suffered gunshot wounds to the chest and head. There were no signs of rape. The weapon used was determined to be a handgun. Both victims had multiple wounds to their bodies. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras inside the shelter. Police began questioning everyone who was at the party that night, hoping that someone might have seen something unusual. This information could be crucial in solving the case. None of the victims' belongings had been stolen, not even the iPad had been left in the car. There were no signs of sexual assault or struggle. Police were piecing together what might have happened on the night of the murder. After Cody's final phone call, the attackers forced the young couple out of the car and took them to a dark shelter, where they were shot one by one. It appears that Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught at the end of the hallway and shot. The shocking murders of Bodhisattva and Cody caused widespread public outrage. Such a dangerous military site was easily accessible. It was not fenced, locked, or monitored. As a result, a debate arose over the demolition of the abandoned building. During the investigation, police learned that several years earlier, a young man had encountered a group of dangerous men in the area. The men were clean-shaven and acted aggressively, suggesting they were members of the same gang. However, the men were never seen again after that encounter. In their investigation, the police focused on a call made by a friend to Cody at 4:30 a.m., when Cody was still alive. Bodhisattva's mother then attempted to reach her daughter at 6:30 a.m. but was unable to make contact. This timeline indicates that the tragic events leading to the double murder occurred between these two calls, starting after 4:30 a.m. A large amount of evidence was collected at the crime scene. Forensic scientists had to analyze thousands of fingerprints and hundreds of spent cartridges, as well as a large amount of trash in the abandoned building, to determine what was related to the case. In addition, the victims' computers were confiscated for valuable information. Police believe that Cody and Bodhisattva may have had an argument with someone, leading to the attack. During questioning, some friends who attended the party recalled that 3 strangers entered the basement. These strangers, aged 17 to 18, arrived in a Honda Odyssey van around midnight and asked to join the party. They were allowed to stay and brought alcohol to share. Cody's group thought they were normal teenagers and didn't suspect anything unusual. However, none of Cody's friends could remember when the strangers left the party. On January 13th, the police received a crucial tip from Sean, an informant. He revealed that his friend, David Smith, had called him on the night of the murders, inviting Sean to a bunker for shooting practice. Sean declined the invitation. A few days later, David contacted him again, sounding very concerned. Sean asked David about recent events, and Sean received a vague answer that alluded to a serious crime. This led Sean to suspect that David might be involved in the double murder at the bunker, so he reported his concerns to the police. Police later interviewed a key witness, who identified David Smith as a 19-year-old from Limestone, about an hour and a half from Holy Dale. On the night of the murder, David and his friends Colin McLaughlin, 18, and Cameron Thompson, 16, had set out for a fun night out that turned deadly. They drove Cameron's mother's SUV into the desert, where they stumbled upon a bunker party. The teens gathered there became their targets, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. In 2007, David, a former high school track and field athlete, lost his athletic scholarship to the University of California, Riverside after a disagreement with the head coach. Unable to pay for college, he was expelled and moved in with his friend Cameron, who then introduced him to Colin. The 3 quickly became close friends, but their aggressive behavior scared the local residents. The 3 criminals were arrested on January 17th. But all 3 denied any involvement in the crime. During a police search of their home, the police found the murder weapon. In addition, blood was found on clothing and shoes, and tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Bodhisattva and Cody, who were murdered. Friends who were present at the bunker that night identified the attackers as strangers who had brought alcohol to the party. All of the teens came from troubled families. Colin's father was a police officer, which gave them access to the weapon used in the murder. Colin, considered the ringleader of the group, had struggled with mental health issues since he was 5 years old. By the age of 17, Colin had attended 7 different schools and had spent some time in an adult detention center. He had significant difficulties adapting socially, which were made worse by his use of alcohol and drugs. During the investigation, many witnesses reported his troubling behavior. Colin even confided in friends that he had thoughts of killing. When he was angry or had an argument with his parents, he would often threaten to kill them. As Colin entered his teens, many people began to fear him, especially when he started talking about mass murder online. During a search of Colin's belongings, police discovered evidence that he had a history of violence. Colin had repeatedly threatened to kill others, including writing detailed notes about shooting up classmates. While in school, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he was put on medication. At age 16, Colin faced court charges for attempting to build an explosive device, a year before he killed Bodhisattva and Cody. He was placed in juvenile detention and, upon his release, was placed on probation for several months. Prior to the killings, he had stopped taking his bipolar medication. The suspects, Colin McLaughlin, Cameron Thompson, and David Smith, have not confessed to the crime. However, during pre-trial hearings, Colin was identified as the primary perpetrator of the murder and was released on $2 million bail. He faces a potential prison sentence of 111 years. In contrast, David Smith's bail was set at $1 million and he faces up to 81 years in prison for his involvement in the crime. In February 2009, the prosecutor's office announced its intention to pursue the death penalty against Colin, while David and Cameron were likely to receive life sentences. The defense argued that Colin, who suffers from bipolar disorder, should receive treatment instead of being detained or executed. As a result, a psychological evaluation was ordered. In 2010, two forensic psychiatrists evaluated Colin and determined that he was mentally sound and aware of his actions at the time of the crime, meaning he was sane and competent to stand trial. Bodhisattva's mother Scherzer believed that the killer should not be executed. She felt that the appropriate punishment would be imprisonment for all three criminals so that they could understand the severity of their actions. The case took a long time to resolve, lasting more than 4 years due to discussions about the evidence and the ages of the criminals. It was eventually decided to try the criminals as adults. In 2011, Cameron Thompson reached a deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and attempted robbery. He agreed to testify against his two friends. Cameron explained that the three of them had planned to rob a car in the desert, but when they arrived, they found no one there. Instead, they stumbled upon a party in a nearby bunker. Initially, they asked to join and gain the trust of the teenagers at the party. But there were too many people and they realized that this was not the right time to strike. They decided to wait until most of the teens had left before attacking anyone. The criminals hid in a truck, armed with guns, and were not detected by Cody. When the couple fell asleep in the truck, the criminals sprang into action. They forced the sleeping couple out of the truck at gunpoint and took them to a dark, secluded area of the bunker. There, they forced the couple to their knees, and Cody was shot execution style. Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught and shot by Colin. They then returned to Cody and shot him again. Unfortunately for the criminals, the couple had no valuables, so the robbery was unsuccessful. They then left the bunker and went home. As part of the deal, Cameron was sentenced to life in prison. Although he had the right to apply for parole, his request was denied and he remains in custody. Colin also accepted a plea deal. Colin remained mostly calm throughout the trial. However, there were instances where he laughed, stuck out his tongue, or acted defiantly, suggesting underlying mental health issues. As a result, Colin was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In 2016, David Smith, a third defendant, also reached a deal. For his cooperation with police, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison and was eligible for parole after 12 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Proctor. Kimberly Proctor was born on January 1, 1992, in Langford, Canada. She came from a middle-class family. Her mother, Lucia, was a manager at Walmart, and her father, Fred, was a mechanic. Kimberly was known for her kind and loving nature, especially towards animals. She had several pets at home, including lizards, rabbits, mice, but her greatest love was for cats. Unfortunately, her fondness for cats led to years of bullying at school, where she often wore small cat ears, and this harassment continued for a long time. According to her mother, Kimberly faced bullying for most of her life. Kimberly's situation became more difficult when she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, which made her more vulnerable to teasing. She began having panic attacks at school. As a result, her parents chose to enroll Kimberly in a different school. This school catered to young people with a variety of problems, including some who had been expelled from other schools for misbehavior. One of her classmates was Cruz Elwood, a boy who faced many challenges. Cruz lived with his mother. His father had been in prison since 2001 after being sentenced to 15 years for abusing and murdering a young girl. Cruz later admitted that he knew about his father's actions but did not want to talk about it. Despite his young age, Cruz was involved in drugs and had a history of stealing money from mailboxes. People who knew him described him as very intelligent. Another troubled student at the school was Cameron Moffat, a friend of Cruz's who was diagnosed with PTSD after being abused when he was 4 years old. Cameron had a difficult relationship with his parents, and neither medication nor counseling seemed to help. He often resisted treatment and began self-harming to cope with his anxiety. His aggressive behavior was evident both at home and at school, where he sometimes carried a knife. Cruz and Cameron met in the 5th grade and quickly became best friends. They did everything together, from skipping school to smoking marijuana. They also loved playing the computer game Warcraft and occasionally visited adult websites. Although their behavior at school was unpredictable, they were not seen as a serious threat. In February 2008, Cruz wrote a blog post about warning signs of a serial killer, listing common traits like cruelty to animals, a fascination with fire, parental abandonment, and a strong interest in violence. He pointed out that he fulfilled all 14 of the criteria he mentioned. By 2009, Kimberly had joined Cruz and Cameron's group, and they began to do everything together. When they weren't hanging out outside, they spent hours texting and chatting. During this time, Kimberly started dating Zach, who was friends with Cruz and Cameron. However, their relationship only lasted a couple of months before Zach decided to break up with her. This breakup upset Kimberly deeply, and she turned to her friends for support, spending long hours chatting online. During one of these conversations, Cameron revealed to Kimberly that he had feelings for her and thought she was beautiful. Kimberly appreciated the compliment but was only interested in Cruz, with whom she had grown closer after her breakup with Zach. Kimberly and Cruz began sharing their most private thoughts online, including secrets they had never revealed to anyone else. Kimberly opened up to Cruz about her honest feelings about her weight and height, and Cruz reassured her that she was beautiful just the way she was. However, Cruz and Cameron's lives began to take a dark and sinister turn. They began drinking blood and bodily fluids to see how they would feel. Cameron's friends said that he would sometimes lash out at his family and yell at his mother, while Cruz became increasingly aggressive toward his mother and defied any restrictions placed on him. Both boys began to have disturbing fantasies about being restrained and abused, leading them to explore adult websites with violent themes. Their discussions with Kimberly became increasingly disturbing. One day, Cameron made an innuendo-filled remark to Kimberly that upset her. When she shared this with Cruz, he responded by making the same suggestion. When Kimberly refused, Cruz threatened her ominously, saying, "Death is coming for you, and you will soon be dead." He then asked her about her plans for the next day. Cruz expressed interest in meeting her to discuss why some people were treating her so badly and other personal issues. They eventually agreed to call and meet the next day. She had no idea that Cruz had already contacted Cameron and they were exchanging messages about Kimberly. In Cameron and Cruz's conversation before the terrible events, they mentioned that they should proceed with their plan, saying that they have to be careful and that it will be interesting. They expressed their desire to do it immediately instead of waiting, saying that they will not harm her right away and can keep her alive but tied up. Later, Cameron and Cruz decide on a specific phrase to signal when to act to harm Kimberly. Cruz also suggests that they meet at the Ford bus stop at 10 o'clock. 18-year-old Kimberly accidentally found herself in a dangerous situation. That morning, Kimberly was still in bed while her mother, Lucia, prepared to leave for work. Before leaving, Lucia kissed Kimberly and expressed her love for her. Since Kimberly had no classes that day, her mother thought she would sleep in, especially since her only commitment was babysitting at 3 p.m. They had planned to start sewing Kimberly's prom dress together when Lucia returned home. However, Lucia was unaware that Kimberly had other plans. She had arranged to meet Cameron and Cruz at the bus station around 10:30 a.m. Kimberly got off the bus at the stop where her friends were waiting. Just minutes earlier, Cameron and Cruz had bought a can of gasoline as part of their terrifying plan. The three friends chatted for a while before heading to Cruz's house in Bali. Up until this point, everything seemed normal to Kimberly, and she had no idea of the terrifying situation her friends had planned for her. When they arrived at the house, Cruz used a code word to signal Cameron, and almost immediately, both attacked Kimberly, beating and kicking her. They bound her feet and ankles, stuffed a sock in her mouth, and taped it shut. Cameron and Cruz violently assaulted Kimberly for hours, ultimately causing her death by suffocation. Afterward, they desecrated her body in horrific ways, mutilating her and placing various items in her genital area, before storing her in a freezer in Cruz's garage. Cruz attempted to cover his tracks and establish an alibi by sending her a message from his computer. In this message, he pretended to be far away and asked her if she had completed her work as a nanny, claiming he needed her advice. Cameron and Cruz's actions were extremely disturbing, and they treated it as a game. That same night, after committing the horrific act, Cruz texted his girlfriend, asking her to come out of the house to meet him. Fortunately, she refused, which may have saved her life. The next morning, Cameron and Cruz placed Kimberly's body in a hockey bag and calmly took a bus to a remote forested area. There, they doused the bag with gasoline and set it on fire. During this time, Cruz made the mistake of using his cell phone to send a message. Meanwhile, Kimberly's parents and relatives were in a state of panic, unaware of her whereabouts. Her mother, Lucia, had tried to call Kimberly the day before, but when her calls went directly to voicemail, she sensed something was wrong. Lucia went to the police station to report Kimberly missing, and the search for Kimberly quickly began. After causing Kimberly's death, both Cruz and Cameron continued their lives as if nothing had happened. Cruz spent the day at home with his girlfriend, while Cameron had lunch with his mother and grandmother. Then they took him to buy a new video game. That night, a young man who was hanging out with friends discovered charred body under a bridge. The body was burned beyond recognition. The body was later identified through dental records and was that of Kimberly. The tragic news devastated Kimberly's family and friends. Police arrived to investigate the crime scene. At the time, police had no leads to identify anyone responsible for this horrific crime. Kimberly's family and friends reported that she had no known conflicts with anyone and were puzzled as to who could have harmed her. In her memory, the family created a Facebook page, which police are closely monitoring in the hopes of uncovering any clues. They are also keeping a close eye on all of Kimberly's acquaintances. The story of the horrific incident shocked Canada, and every media outlet covered it. At the time, Cruz was eager to share his dark exploit with someone he trusted. He decided to use the in-game chat feature, believing that chat records were unlikely to be kept or checked. On March 23, 5 days after the murder, Cruz messaged a young girl from Halifax, urging her to read something important. He then sent her links to news articles about the incident to prove that he was telling the truth. The girl was horrified by what Cruz revealed but reacted the way he wanted, assuring him that she would always support him, no matter what his actions were. Cruz replied that that's why he trusted her, and he would repay her trust, no matter what. Suddenly, Cameron joined the conversation and backed up Cruz's account. The girl asked Cameron if he had any thoughts about Kimberly's family and friends and the lives he had impacted. Cameron simply replied that he felt no remorse for any of that. The young girl wrote to Cruz again, asking him not to repeat his previous actions. He promised he wouldn't. As time went on, the Cameron and Cruz their lives as if nothing had happened, but they kept a close eye on the investigation's progress. Their online chats and text messages mostly revolved around updates related to the case. Cruz confided to a friend that his father had advised him not to answer questions at school. This advice may have stemmed from his father's suspicion that Cruz was involved in Kimberly's death or knew who was responsible. An incident later occurred involving Samantha, one of Kimberly's close friends, who overheard Cruz making negative comments about Kimberly. Samantha asked him to stop, explaining that it still hurt her to hear such things so soon after Kimberly's death. In response, Cruz yelled that he did not care about Kimberly's death. Another student even reported hearing Cruz say that he was glad Kimberly was dead because he did not like her. At that point, police began investigating Cameron and Cruz, leading to their questioning. Both admitted to seeing Kimberly on the morning she went missing, but said they didn't spend much time with her because she had to go to school. Police began monitoring Cameron and Cruz's online activities. Police obtained a warrant to install wiretaps in their home and both were placed under close surveillance. Their cell phones were also tapped and investigations into their devices were conducted. Disturbing evidence was discovered, including text messages exchanged between them in online chats. Police seized numerous documents related to their activities. Police believe Cruz and Cameron were responsible for Kimberly's death. Cameron and Cruz were then arrested and charged with Kimberly's murder. Both appeared calm and unresponsive. Cruz remained silent throughout the interrogation. Cameron, on the other hand, repeatedly taunted the police and refused to provide any information. He eventually confessed to his crimes in a cold manner. After Cameron's confession, Cruz was forced to admit everything. They both later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and destruction of human remains. A year after the events of 2011, Cameron and Cruz appeared at their trial, appearing calm and talking animatedly to each other about the questions they were being questioned about. Throughout the hearing, they remained calm and unflinching. A psychological evaluation found that Cruz displayed characteristics of a rapist that were rare for his age and was at high risk of committing violent acts again. He was also diagnosed with clinical psychopathy. The psychiatrist indicated that Cruz would require intensive and prolonged supervision for at least the next 10 years. Cameron had a high rate of reoffending and serious mental health issues. During the hearing, the judge needed to decide whether to try both young men as adults and transfer them to an adult prison or to treat them as juveniles. It's important to note that the defense requested they be tried as adults, believing this would provide the boys with better educational and rehabilitation opportunities. Only Kimberly's parents were focused on seeking the death penalty for the Cameron and Cruz. However, Canada does not have a death penalty. If the young men are tried as adults, they would face life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. If Cruz and Cameron had been tried as juveniles, the maximum sentence they would have faced would have been 6 years, along with 4 years of community service. Cameron Moffat and Cruz Wellwood were then sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of appealing for bail after only 10 years. Kimberly's family has expressed their anger at the lenient sentence. Kimberly's father, Fred, expressed concern that Cameron and Cruz might continue their harmful behavior and that this was unacceptable. Fred pointed out that both had confessed to their actions but showed no remorse, which he believed justified their lifelong detention. Meanwhile, Pacific High School, which Kimberly and the two killers attended, has established a protocol for dealing with threats of violence. The protocol would allow police, schools, and social services to exchange information about students who might pose a threat in order to prevent tragic consequences. When asked why they had treated Kimberly's body that way, Cruz mentioned that for him, it was about finding the satisfaction he craved. And he felt a sense of power in taking someone's life. He shared that his life until then had felt empty and pointless, and this act gave him a sense of fulfillment. Cruz's first petition for parole was set for June 2019 but was postponed to August. The psychological evaluation conducted at that time was nearly identical to the initial assessment, indicating that Cruz was still completely unfit for parole. Consequently, the specialist did not recommend granting him release in 2020. His appeal was denied once more, meaning Cruz will have to wait until 2025 for another chance at parole. Sometimes people get a second chance, but this case should not have been given a second chance. It was clear that there was a deliberate intention to commit a terrible act. Individuals like Cameron and Cruz acted out their darkest fantasies without remorse. In fact, it was revealed that Kimberly was just one of 3 victims they targeted. Given the nature of their actions and the psychiatric evaluations, it is clear that Cameron and Cruz should not be allowed to live freely in society. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nicole Pitts. Nicole Pitts was born in late February 1973 and grew up in King County. She attended Eastern Washington College. Every summer, her family traveled to Seattle and spent much of their time at Lake Samash. Nicole had a close relationship with her mother, Gail, and had a good relationship with her father, Rod. In the 1990s, while working at a fitness club, she met her future husband, David. Their relationship quickly developed into a romantic relationship. After spending some time together, they married in 2002 in Maui, Hawaii. In 2005, the couple bought a condominium in Linwood, Washington, a place where they could enjoy their time together. At that time, Linwood was a quiet town with a population of fewer than 40,000 people. It featured narrow streets and many bars and restaurants, similar to their previous home. The young family quickly fell in love with the area. Nicole was outgoing and made friends easily. Within days of moving in, she had made many new friends. She is an animal lover and often walks her dog around the neighborhood or relaxes at home with her 2 cats. She cares for them as if they were her own children. Nicole's career was going well. After finishing school, she worked at a fitness club for a while before becoming a corporate manager at a mobile phone company. She lived close to where she worked. Nicole was an important member of the team because she easily connected with her colleagues and helped them solve problems. However, she faced challenges from an early age. She was introduced to alcohol as a teenager and eventually became an alcoholic. This started when her parents divorced, which left her feeling lost. Her mother, a flight attendant, was often away on business trips, so Nicole was often left in the care of her elderly grandmother, which led to her hanging out with the wrong crowd. Fortunately, Nicole's parents noticed their daughter's issue early on, and with the support of her family, she was able to overcome her bad habit. They attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings together, where she received guidance, making her journey easier. However, her alcohol use had lasting effects, resulting in significant health problems. At age 21, Nicole was diagnosed with endometriosis and underwent 3 surgeries. Following these procedures, she was prescribed pain medication to control her chronic pain. By 2006, 32-year-old Nicole had been avoiding alcohol for 8 years. Despite this, she remained an active and valuable member of her Alcoholics Anonymous group. She attended every meeting, viewing them not just as a way to manage her own recovery, but also as an opportunity to support others in their struggles. Nicole understood the challenges of the fight against addiction. From a young age, she had a passion for cooking, which only grew stronger over time. She loved preparing a variety of dishes and often brought her homemade meals to work for her husband, David, who always appreciated her efforts. Nicole was very close to her mother and called her every day. In early 2006, she was excited about her upcoming 33rd birthday. However, just 2 days before her birthday, she unexpectedly missed an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in nearby Renton, surprising everyone. That night, David returned home late from work and went straight to bed, thinking Nicole would still be home. However, the next morning, he discovered that she had left, and he never saw her again. David tried calling Nicole to check on her, but she didn't answer his calls. He was worried that she might be upset because he hadn't spoken to her at dinner the night before and had gone to bed early from exhaustion. Despite his attempts to contact her, Nicole remained silent, which made him even more worried. He also contacted some of her friends and her mother, but no one had seen her. That evening, when David returned home and Nicole had not returned, he became alarmed. Worried, he decided to go to the sheriff's office, but was told that there was not enough time to classify her as missing. However, David convinced the police to investigate her whereabouts, as her behavior was very unusual, and he feared that something might have happened to her. Police arrived at David's home and discovered that, in addition to Nicole, her 2003 Volkswagen Jetta was also missing. Nicole had left for work that morning, but was gone. Her mother became concerned about Nicole's disappearance, especially since she had not received any calls from her daughter all day, which worried her. After police confirmed that no one had seen Nicole since she went missing, they began searching for her that same day. The family of the Nicole booked flights to Washington, hoping for the best and wanting to assist in finding their daughter as quickly as possible. Everyone was confused because Nicole was known to be reliable and responsible. She would never have vanished or ignored calls. Even if she couldn't answer right away, she would have called back soon. As her silence continued, her parents and husband grew increasingly worried. Those involved in the search for Nicole sprang into action immediately. Nicole's mother and stepfather went straight to the police upon arriving in the city. Members of the Alcoholics Anonymous Club, who cared deeply for Nicole and wanted to support her family, also joined the search efforts. The club was significant to Nicole, as she never missed a meeting and was set to receive an award for 8 years of sobriety, which she took great pride in. There was no reason for her to leave or abandon everything. Nicole's voicemail was filled with calls from friends and family, but none of them had been able to reach her. Some were concerned that Nicole might have relapsed, despite successfully battling her addiction for years. The police were actively searching for her, searching the surrounding areas of Linwood, but they found nothing. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents took action by creating a website to gather information about Nicole. Many people responded to the family's call for help, but most of the messages were just well wishes, and the little information they received turned out to be false. The search seemed to stall until a new event changed the course of the investigation. On February 7, a local resident was jogging near a wooded area of San Francisco Park, near a small lake. He accidentally discovered a strange object under a raspberry bush. Curious, he approached and was horrified to discover the body of a girl. A nearby witness quickly called the police. The police arrived in time, and acquaintances recognized the body as Nicole's. Forensic experts later confirmed that there was no evidence of rape. After the autopsy in the laboratory, it was proven that the Nicole had received multiple injuries during the beating, but the cause of death was asphyxia. The Nicole had multiple blunt force injuries on her legs, torso, and head, indicating a brutal murder driven by personal hatred. This raised the question, who could have done this? Nicole had no known enemies. The case was changed from a disappearance to a murder investigation. The news of her death was devastating for David and parents. News of her death devastated David and her parents. Police began investigating her bank card transactions to trace her final movements. They discovered that her card was last used on January 30 in a nearby town where she had paid for gas. Police requested video footage from the gas station, suspecting that the killer may have made the purchase instead of Nicole and hoping to identify him in the footage. While police wait for surveillance camera footage, they continue to search for Nicole's car, as it may contain important information for the case. Police reviewed Nicole's identity and social connections, but still found no clues. Nicole was known as one of the friendliest members of her work group and club. She had no enemies. Instead, she was a devoted friend, a loving wife, a caring daughter, and a skilled employee who loved her pets. Nicole even turned her own struggle with alcohol into a positive by supporting others who were trying to get sober, setting an example for them. While the police were searching for the car, her relatives and friends shared information about the missing car and Nicole's situation. They publicly appealed for help, urging people to be aware of the car and avoid touching it. Flyers were distributed that stressed the importance of calling the police immediately if the car was discovered, as the car was linked to Nicole's murder. This prompted local residents to pay attention to Nicole's car. On February 21, 2006, her car was discovered parked near the university. Police quickly seized the car for forensic analysis, hoping to gather evidence to arrest the perpetrator and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. Inside the car, they discovered a large amount of trash and various items, including books and sports equipment. Police discovered that after Nicole went missing, someone had used her ID and credit cards. Police are investigating the possibility that Nicole's car may have broken down on the way and she was picked up by a stranger and harmed, and the location of her car was unusual because Nicole was supposed to be traveling to another city. The position of the car seat suggested that it had been driven by someone much larger and taller than her. In the lab, experts meticulously measured the seat position to gather clues about a potential suspect. They found DNA evidence inside the car, including hair and a single fingerprint. Police collected DNA and checked. Several patrol officers searched the area where the car was found. They asked anyone nearby if they had seen Nicole's car or who had parked it, but this did not yield any useful information. The police discovered that the car had been parked in the lot since February 10, as an illegal parking ticket from that date was stuck to the windshield. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras available to assist in the investigation. Forensic tests showed that all traces of DNA in her car belonged to Nicole and David. The investigation yielded no new information to solve the case. By early April, there had been no progress. Nicole's parents had offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. During this time, Nicole's mother, Gail, made frequent appearances on various television channels to raise awareness of the case. After a while, Nicole's family had to return to Arizona to work, but they kept in touch with the police who were handling the investigation. Nicole's father, Rod, was heartbroken and frustrated that the investigation was taking so long. Despite their efforts, the investigation continued without any breakthroughs. In September, the case was handed over to an experienced police officer. The new police quickly requested a search warrant for the house of the Nicole, which had not been done before. He aimed to find clues among her belongings, particularly on Nicole's computer. Unfortunately, the house revealed no signs of a crime, no blood or other evidence. The computer also yielded no useful information. Police continued to interview witnesses and acquaintances of Nicole. One of them was Barbara, a friend who had met Nicole at an Alcoholics Anonymous club. They had planned to meet at a coffee shop the evening Nicole went missing, but she never showed up. At first, Barbara thought Nicole was just running late. Then Barbara tried calling Nicole several times that day, but Nicole did not answer any of her calls. During this time, the police still had no clues to the case. Meanwhile, Nicole's parents, Rob and Gail, were at their home in Arizona. Their grief did not subside for a year. Feeling desperate, they decided to hire a private investigator because they were puzzled by the inconsistencies in the case. Nicole had left the house without her wedding ring, which was very unusual for someone who was so proud of her marriage and who would never willingly remove such a meaningful symbol. A private investigator began his investigation, but no leads were found. Nicole's family then increased the reward for information about the criminal to $25,000. Organizations focused on fighting crime and finding missing persons contributed an additional $1,000. The community remained tense, knowing that a dangerous criminal was still at large, the perpetrator seemingly without a motive, suggesting that he could be a madman ready to strike at any time. The police then requested a search warrant for Nicole's computer, believing it might contain clues about the criminal. In October 2009, the private investigator hired by Nicole's parents was charged with fraud. He falsely claimed to have found evidence in the case, but said he needed money to handle it. Her parents gave him more money, but then the private investigator disappeared and took on another case. As a result, his license was revoked. Nicole's parents no longer have a private investigator and no leads on the identity of the killer. In 2011, 5 years after Nicole's death, the investigation was still ongoing, but no significant updates were made. On March 21, 2012, the final suspect was arrested and revealed to be Nicole's husband, David. By this time, police had enough evidence against him. He was held in custody with bail set at $1 million. The prosecutor noted that the case had progressed significantly due to new technologies that were previously unavailable, especially in the field of forensic science. Police found that David's account of the night before Nicole's disappearance did not seem convincing. Additionally, police noted that only David and Nicole's DNA and fingerprints were found in her car. If strangers had been in the car, their fingerprints would still be there because they had not been erased. If the criminal had tried to erase the fingerprints, there would have been no fingerprints left. The driver's seat was adjusted to fit David's size, and surveillance footage from a gas station captured a person resembling him. After Nicole went missing, he used her cell phone to make multiple calls from various locations around the city. Police believed he was trying to throw the investigation off track. However, modern tracking technology allowed them to pinpoint the exact location of the calls, proving that Nicole could not have been there at the time because she was dead. Notably, both Nicole's and her husband's phones worked in the same areas. Strangulation, the method of murder, usually indicates a personal connection between the killer and the victim. Evidence found at the crime scene indicated that the killer was someone close to Nicole. This is consistent with the fact that she was not sexually assaulted. The medical examiner determined Nicole's time of death. It was found that she was killed at night or early in the morning while still in bed. Her limbs were clean, with no signs of struggle. Forensic experts determined the time of death by examining Nicole's stomach contents. They found that the food Nicole had eaten the night before was still undigested, suggesting that she had been murdered before she got up to go to work the next morning. Although they appeared to be a loving couple, it was clear that this was just a cover, and there were multiple reasons behind the crime. At the time, the family was facing serious financial difficulties. David is quite the party animal. He enjoys drinking and smoking marijuana, which puts a dent in the family budget. Nicole spent a lot of time and effort dealing with her addiction and had been trying to stay sober for years. David was jealous of his wife's strength. He also had affairs, and during the investigation, it was discovered that he had had at least 4 affairs. His lifestyle meant that he often pressured his wife into having sex. He even tried to drug her at a club to convince her, but she refused. This made him angry. He often met women at clubs, which led to sexual encounters. Just days after Nicole went missing, he began seeking new relationships. By the time he was arrested, David had remarried and had a child. This was especially painful for Nicole's parents, as their daughter had always wanted children, but David had no interest in that. Furthermore, David quickly began collecting documents to claim Nicole's life insurance. After gathering all the information, David was called in for questioning. At the police station, he denied any involvement in the murder. When asked to take a lie detector test, he agreed, but the results showed that he had lied. He was eventually arrested and charged with murder, but David firmly denied any involvement in the crime. The trial started in September 2013, 7 years after Nicole passed away. Her family and friends gathered in the courthouse, hoping for justice. The defense lawyer for the David argued that Nicole's death was linked to her relapsed alcohol addiction and possibly a new addiction to prescription drugs. He pointed to an empty pill bottle found during a search of the bathroom as evidence of this. And the defense insisted that all the evidence against David was circumstantial and that the case was based on speculation. Nicole's parents testified in court that David did not participate in the search efforts, did not help distribute flyers, and only pretended to be upset. Nicole's mother explained that the medication in question was a prescription painkiller prescribed to her daughter to treat severe abdominal pain caused by her endometriosis, which had significantly improved her condition. Prosecutors were unable to prove intentional conduct, so David Pitts was charged with second-degree murder. David was sentenced to 18 years and 4 months in prison, the maximum sentence under state law. Detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Kara Nichols. Kara Nichols, born on May 20, 1993, was the middle child in her family. She grew up with her brother Terrence and younger sister, living in a very united and loving family. Sociable and friendly, Kara thrived in school and had a strong passion for art, particularly painting. Her talent has won her many awards in art competitions. At the same time, she is also considered to have a promising future. She is also very empathetic, often understanding and feeling other people's pain as her own. During her teenage years, Kara's behavior changed a lot. She became introverted, and her academic performance dropped. At the age of 13, she was arrested for shoplifting and sentenced to community service. Her parents, Julia and Paul, were confused by this sudden change in their daughter. She never lacked for anything, so her stealing may have been her way of rebelling against established norms. At 16, Kara's mental health deteriorated after the death of her beloved dog, plunging her into a deep depression. Her parents arranged for her to see a psychologist, but the sessions were ineffective, and her condition worsened. Eventually, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she was diagnosed with a personality disorder. After a short period of treatment, her condition improved with prescribed medication. However, due to the many side effects of the medication, she decided to stop taking it and turned to illegal substances, believing they would be a better alternative to antipsychotics. Before graduating, she had to transfer schools several times because of behavioral problems. After graduating from high school, Kara worked as a waitress, while also pursuing her childhood dream of becoming a model. With her attractive appearance, she believes that she will succeed in this field. She has been working hard to find modeling agencies and increase her body of work. During this time, her health improved greatly, and she was no longer addicted. However, over time, she came to understand that success in modeling required more than just beauty. It also depended on luck and connections. In the summer of 2012, Kara's family relocated to Chicago, Illinois. Unfortunately, the move was difficult for she, and her depression returned. Stress caused her to turn to drugs again, despite her parents' best efforts to support her and take her to a rehab facility. In the end, she was kicked out of there for not following the rules. Her parents were worried, not only because of her behavior, but also because of how she was funding her addiction. Her salary as a waitress was not enough to cover these expenses. Kara's parents felt disheartened. Her mental state changed from day to day. After some brief conversations, she decided to move back to her hometown, believing that being in familiar surroundings and reconnecting with old friends would help her recover. Although her family disliked the idea, they couldn't persuade her to stay. Eventually, she returned to Colorado Springs, and her brother Terrence promised to help her. The care and affection the two siblings showed each other comforted their parents. However, Kara valued her liberty and chose not to live with Terrence, visiting him only occasionally. Instead, she decided to rent an apartment with 3 male friends, which shocked her parents when they found out. They insisted she move out, but she refused, explaining that she had no better options and felt the men were no danger. Gradually, life returned to normal for Kara. She resumed her previous job and continued her modeling career by creating a profile on Model Mayhem. Over time, she received more modeling offers, but they didn't produce the results she had hoped for. Standing out among thousands of profiles proved is big challenge. Eventually, Kara encountered financial difficulties. She fell behind on her rent and had to eat food from his roommate. She confided in her brother, Terrence, who provided her with financial support. She was determined to seize the opportunity she received on October 9. However, no one expected that night to be her last. At the time of her disappearance, Kara was 19 years old. She was last seen wearing a hooded sweatshirt, dark jeans, white DC sneakers, and pink headphones. Kara is a girl with outstanding height, with green eyes, and has 2 tattoos, a marijuana leaf on her right ankle and an astronaut on her left wrist. She also had multiple piercings on her ears and above her lip. Flyers distributed in the area described these features, along with other details about her appearance. It was also noted that she struggled with bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. Her older brother, Terrence, was the first to suspect that something was wrong. Soon after, her parents, Julia and Paul Nichols, joined the search for their daughter. Although Kara used banned substances, but her family knew she always stayed in touch and kept them updated about her whereabouts. When she failed to call back on October 10 and 11, her family became increasingly concerned. They always cared for her, but she wanted to live freely and did not want to follow any constraints. Lately, she has become more withdrawn and only talks to her brother Terrence. Kara's modeling job did not bring in the expected income. So, when she was offered a well-paying lingerie photo shoot, she eagerly accepted. She told her roommates about her plans and left late at night. The shoot was scheduled for early morning in Denver, so it was more convenient to leave the night before. She wasn't traveling alone, she was accompanied by colleagues from the industry. Since neither she nor her friends had a driver's license or a car, they managed to find someone to drive them. At first, Kara's story didn't raise any suspicions. People who know her often see her modeling profile and social networks filled with professional photos. Everything seemed normal until she failed to return the next day or the day after. The last time her brother, Terrence, spoke to her was at 11:45 p.m. on October 9. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted, and she did not call back. Terrence thought the phone was disconnected and went to sleep, not knowing that he would never hear his sister's voice again. As of October 10, Kara did not respond to any calls or messages. Her voicemail was consistently active. Terrence assumed she was either busy or resting after work. However, by October 11, there was still no word from her. This strange silence made him extremely worried, because it was not like Kara was always out of contact. Worried, Terrence decided to visit Kara's home and spoke with her neighbors. None of them had seen she in several days. One young man mentioned seeing her get into a dark-colored sedan around 11:00 p.m. Unfortunately, he couldn't identify the driver due to the darkness, but noted that she didn't seem to be alone. Terrence then went into Kara's room to look for clues. He noticed that her essential belongings, such as her cosmetics bag, purse, charger, and laptop, were still there. On the bedside table, he even found $300 in cash. It was clear she hadn't planned to leave for an extended period. When he opened her laptop, he discovered that she hadn't been online for more than 2 days. This was unusual, as she was often checking her email for modeling opportunities. Convinced that something was wrong, he reported her disappearance to the police. At the police station, Terrence explained everything in detail, but the police were in no hurry to begin the search. They argued that Kara was an adult and didn't have to inform anyone of her whereabouts. They suggested she might have been held up at a photo shoot, gone somewhere else, or possibly had a boyfriend no one knew about and was spending time with him. However, the police's explanation still did not reassure Terrence. He knew his sister well. No matter what happens, she will definitely contact him. He was certain something bad had happened to her. However, the police calmed him down and asked him to come back later. Terrence then contacted their parents. He explained the situation and asked for their help. He understood that in a situation as serious as this, there needs to be joint cooperation. Upon learning of their daughter's disappearance, the family quickly flew to Colorado Springs. When they received the news that their daughter was missing, Kara's family quickly flew to Colorado Springs. Her cell phone was still off, and she had missed an important appointment, which made they even more worried. They then went to the police station to ask the police to carefully review the report they had filed. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office eventually recognized that the circumstances surrounding her disappearance were concerning. Detectives contacted locals to find out information about Kara's whereabouts. Kara's parents permitted investigators to access her cell phone data. Experts confirmed that her last message was sent to her brother, Terrence. Data from her cellular provider indicated that on October 9th, her phone was traveling north before it was turned off. Friends and acquaintances joined the search, distributing flyers across Colorado Springs and Denver. Investigators also looked into other communication methods used by Kara, particularly her laptop. This leads to the discovery of a secret she has kept from her family. Some of her modeling jobs are actually a cover for a call girl service she has been involved in since she was 17. This shocked her parents, Paul and Julia, when they learned the truth about her income. Unfortunately, they needed to agree to release this information to generate new leads, but doing so could negatively impact the investigation and reduce public interest. There were many cases where the victim's image was significantly distorted, and Kara's family did not want to share their hardships. However, they felt they had no choice but to hope to find she. Unfortunately, no miracle happened. After the new information was released, media outlets began canceling interviews with her family, leading to a decrease in coverage of her disappearance. The search for Kara was suspended. The National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation was the only organization involved in assisting with the investigation into Kara's disappearance. They helped keep her case front of mind for the public and the authorities. In November 2012, detectives announced that they would interview 2 women who were believed to have been in the car with Kara on the night she disappeared. Descriptions of these women suggested they might have worked in the same field as Kara. While they were important witnesses, they were not considered suspects, as they were likely the last people to see her alive. A composite sketch of one of the women was released to the public, but no one came forward with information. This made people doubt the existence of these women, and the investigation was stalled again. That month, Kara's photos appeared on a call girl service website in Las Vegas. However, detectives confirmed that she had not posted them herself. Someone had exploited her fame for personal gain, and the profile was eventually taken down. Although some people interested in the case contacted the police station, after investigation, these reports were confirmed to be false. In the spring of 2013, a businessman from Colorado Springs claimed to have seen Kara between late October and December 2012 with a tall, disheveled man. She looked frightened, suggesting she was being held against her will. One day, this man pushed her, and a bystander intervened, threatening him, and asked him to leave her alone. The witness's account was verified. Although police found the man described, but he said the woman with him was actually his ex-girlfriend. In the summer of 2013, a criminal law student took it upon himself to investigate Kara's case. He traveled to Denver, spoke with many homeless individuals and substance users. Several people reported meeting Kara at a non-profit that provides syringes and needles to drug users. However, this lead turned out to be false, as did all the other testimonies he received. Many people have lost faith in Kara being found alive, because she has been missing for longer than the usual disappearances. In the fall of 2013, Kara's parents have offered a reward to anyone who provides information about their daughter's whereabouts, to no avail. They ruled out a ransom kidnapping as no demands were received. However, the following year, a new development occurred, providing a major breakthrough and reigniting the investigation. In May 2014, Deputy Sheriff Cliff Porter admitted that he had mishandled the investigation into Kara's disappearance. He admitted that he had not focused enough on her case and had overlooked important evidence from the beginning. This admission shocked her family, who felt that their daughter's case had been neglected because of her profession. The mishandling of cell phone records has raised concerns about the conduct of the investigating agency. The administration has been criticized for inaction. Multiple audits have led to disciplinary action against the department, and several individuals have been fired. In May 2016, former Sheriff Terry Makita and some of his staff were charged with corruption, fabricating witness statements, kidnapping, and extortion. This led Kara's family to believe that her case had not been properly handled. However, this situation has led to the opening of a new investigation, especially when new detectives are involved. On February 1, 2022, Christina Hollendorfer went to the police station. Before that, detectives had tried to talk to her several times, but she refused to cooperate. It turned out that since 2014, she had not wanted to testify against her ex-husband, Joel. However, after many years, she decided to speak up and accuse him of killing Kara Nichols. An analysis of Kara's calls and messages showed that she received 8 calls between 9:58 and 11:08 p.m. on October 9, most of which were from Joel. Detectives had questioned him several times, but they only received general information. He admitted that he had hired a call girl and had planned to meet her between the evening of October 9th and the morning of October 10, but the meeting never happened as the escort did not arrive. Joel's statement raised suspicions, especially since data from Kara's phone indicated that she was near his parents' house on the night she disappeared. On October 15, 2014, detectives searched Joel's home and his family's property. During the search, they spoke with Joel and his mother, Betty. They seemed calm and friendly, and it did not appear that they were hiding anything. They willingly showed the detectives around the property, including several fresh burial sites for deceased animals. Joel's family has owned the farm since 1985, which includes a large livestock yard. Dogs trained to detect human remains searched the area and reacted near some livestock graves. However, further investigation of these graves found no evidence of human remains. It's possible the dogs mistook the scent of dead animals for that of a human. To rule Joel out as a suspect, samples from several suspicious areas were collected and analyzed. Unfortunately, the results indicated that the samples were not connected to the case. Despite this, suspicions about Joel remained. As it turns out, Joel has a history of serious harassment and has violated his probation multiple times. He was a hardened criminal who consistently broke the terms of his parole and used banned substances. This led to the breakup of his family. Investigators approached his ex-wife, Christina, multiple times. During these discussions, they revealed that she and he were raising 2 children together. Initially, she was hesitant to share details about their life and eventually stopped communicating altogether. As a result, Joel remained the sole suspect in Kara's disappearance, along with other theories. After 8 years, new information about Joel has come to light. Christina claimed that in November 2014, he had confessed to her that he had accidentally killed a call girl and buried her body in an old horse grave. She learned of this confession after his father's death. Following the funeral, he revealed that he felt guilty about his father's passing. According to Christina, he confessed to his parents what he had done. After hearing this, his father, who was old, fell into a severe depression. This condition severely weakened his father's health and eventually led to his death. During that time, his family covered for him. This behavior explained the hospitality and cooperation shown by Betty and Joel during the search of the farm, as they sought to avoid raising further suspicion. On February 3, 2022, authorities conducted another search at Joel's home. They thoroughly excavated the farm and discovered human remains buried in a 2-meter deep pit. 4 days later, he was arrested. Subsequent analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Kara, who had been missing. Although only bones were found, modern technology allowed for her identification. During questioning, Joel initially remained composed, but eventually confessed that he had not intended to kill Kara. He said he met her through a call girl website. On October 9th, he called her and arranged to meet, then picked her up from her home. They had some intimate moments in his old car, and everything was going smoothly until he suddenly strangled her. When he realized she had lost consciousness, he stopped. He attempted to perform first aid, but it was too late. She was already dead. Panicked, he drove her to his family farm and buried her in the first grave he found. Over time, he moved her body several times and ultimately buried her where his mother's favorite horse was laid to rest. This explains why service dogs get confused about scents. Additionally, this specific area had not been searched during the initial investigation. Joel Hollendorfer was soon charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Meanwhile, his mother, Betty, claimed she had no knowledge of her son's crime, insisting that she had always cooperated with the investigation and truly believed in his innocence. The hearings occurred in the summer of 2023. The prosecution argued that Joel deliberately committed the crime to fulfill his dark fantasies. Meanwhile, forensic experts were unable to provide a clear explanation for Kara's death. However, they determined that asphyxiation was the cause, based on the fact that her hyoid bone was broken. Experts stated that it is impossible to accidentally strangle someone to death, as there is always time to reconsider and stop. Another important factor was Kara's condition related to drug use. The defense claimed that her death resulted from asphyxiation. They argued that a healthy person would have a much better chance of recovery in similar circumstances than someone dependent on substances. The trial described Kara as a severe addict, suggesting she had little chance of survival due to the long-term effects of the drugs on her body. Unfortunately, the defense's claims cannot be verified or denied at this time. Kara's family was deeply distressed by the way their daughter was depicted. Her father said this description made the jury lose sympathy and view her as a victim who did not deserve mercy. Throughout the trial, Joel did not show remorse, and some witnesses noted that he even smiled at times. In the end, Joel's charges were downgraded to second-degree murder. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 24 years in prison. This sentence did not satisfy Kara's family, who had hoped for a life sentence for Joel. Additionally, due to a lack of evidence, no other individuals were held accountable. Kara's parents said the verdict was a serious failure of the justice system. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Nasirova. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from Olga Tsvik, 35, a Ukrainian immigrant who worked as a beautician, who reported that several valuables had gone missing from her bedroom. She explained to police that she had recently been to the hospital, where she experienced severe dizziness and nausea, with occasional loss of consciousness. Even after returning home, she continued to appear distracted. During the investigation, the police conducted a detailed interrogation of Olga. She recalled a recent troubling encounter with a client named Victoria Nasirova, who came to her home and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions. Victoria had been in contact with the salon before and often acted as if she and Olga were friends. However, on that day, Victoria asked to come to Olga's home to get eyelash extensions. Olga explained that she only worked at the salon and did not accept home customers, but Victoria deliberately ignored her explanation and insisted on urgent eyelash extensions, and Olga finally agreed. Olga later told the police that Victoria had tried to ask her out several times, but she had refused. Another notable detail was that Victoria looked very similar to Olga, which often made Olga feel uncomfortable. During the investigation, it was discovered that Victoria had shown up at Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local bakery. Victoria ate 2 and insisted that Olga have a third, to which Olga eventually agreed. After a brief tea party with cheesecakes, Olga felt unwell. Once Victoria left, Olga became extremely nauseous and lost consciousness for about 30 minutes. When she woke up, she called 911 and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. However, the doctors found nothing wrong in her blood tests. Upon returning home, Olga discovered that some of her valuables were missing and reported the theft to the police. Police were initially skeptical of her story, suspecting that Olga may have been under the influence of drugs, which were causing her to hallucinate. Her unusual behavior and appearance contributed to their suspicions. Police concluded that her account of the incident, including her reference to a woman who resembled her, was likely fabricated. Olga firmly denied using drugs and presented her argument convincingly. She believed that her issues stemmed from a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, suggesting it might have been poisoned. The police quickly inspected the scene and discovered a box from a local bakery in the trash. Olga identified the box as the cheesecake Victoria had brought. The police collected it as evidence because it still had crumbs left inside. Analysis of the cheesecake could determine whether it was the cause of Olga's problems. The examination of the cheesecake revealed no abnormalities. Despite this, the Olga insisted that the dessert was the reason for her illness. She mentioned that she had visited the hospital where doctors examined her but found nothing unusual. In response to inquiries about her condition and the tests conducted, police contacted the hospital. However, the doctors declined to share information due to privacy policies. The police interpreted this refusal as further evidence to doubt the Olga's claims. Additionally, they could not locate the client mentioned by Olga, leading to a postponement of the case until more information becomes available. A neighbor provided details after noticing a suspicious woman near Olga's apartment the following day. The woman appeared several times, lingering around Olga's apartment until she encountered the neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and then left in a hurry. Concerned, the neighbor noticed that Olga's apartment door was open and decided to check on her. When she entered, the neighbor found the apartment uncomfortably hot, with the heating system on full blast despite the hot summer weather. Olga was alive but unconscious in bed, dressed strangely, in a revealing bra and sweatpants. The police felt that someone had deliberately changed her clothes. Scattered around her were powerful pills, suggesting that Olga may have taken them with the intention of ending her life. The neighbor quickly called 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive, and very similar to Olga. After receiving new information, the police were convinced that the woman who resembled Olga was real and not a figment of Olga's imagination. Therefore, the police intensified their efforts to investigate the case. The police suspected that Victoria Nasirova, who was involved in a cheesecake in the previous case, was involved in this case. The police began searching for Victoria, but they had no clues or even any photos of her. However, a private investigator, who had been monitoring Victoria's activities for a long time, tracked Victoria down on the internet and contacted the police. He located Victoria, where she was advertising her escort services on a dating website and social media. The private investigator suspected that she used these platforms to find victims for her crimes. Her methods were effective, Victoria would meet her victims, drug them with psychotropic substances to render them unconscious, and then steal their valuables. Meanwhile, Olga eventually recovered from her traumatic experience. After leaving the hospital, she shared her story of poisoning on social media. Soon after, one of her clients mentioned a man named Ruben Barakov who had gone through a similar situation. Ruben owned a dry cleaning business and had met a woman named Victoria on a Russian dating site a few months before Olga suffered cheese poisoning. Victoria had invited Ruben to her home, bragging about her cooking skills. He accepted the invitation, but as soon as he tasted her food, he passed out. Victoria then rummaged through his pockets, taking an expensive watch, cash, and cards. Ruben was under the influence of a powerful psychoactive substance and truly believed that it had nearly killed him. Victoria then took him to a dry cleaner's. She explained to Ruben's colleagues that he was drunk and she left. When Ruben regained consciousness, he realized that he had been robbed. The private investigator suspected the situation was much more serious and that the two victims were lucky to be alive. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia who asked him to help track down a dangerous criminal. Nadia Ford contacted the private investigator after her biological mother, Alla Alexienko, went missing. Nadia currently lives in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia, who is from Krasnodar, was raised by her mother, Alla, who worked hard to provide for her children. Nadia had dreamed of living in the United States since she was a child, and her dream came true when she came to study in America in 2007. While there, she met a man, married him, and took his last name, Ford. However, their marriage did not last, and they eventually divorced. Nadia chose to stay in the United States and successfully built her life there. She kept a close relationship with her mother, Alla, who was living alone at the time. Alla sold her house and then moved to a new apartment. In early 2013, after moving into a new apartment, Alla had a new neighbor named Victoria Nasirova. Despite the significant age difference, Victoria quickly became friends with Alla. Alla shared stories about her daughter's life in the United States, which sparked Victoria's interest in visiting America and meeting Nadia. Alla then arranged for them to meet. In September 2013, Victoria went to New York, where she met Nadia and they became close friends. Nadia was a kind and pleasant woman. Victoria sought her advice on how to stay in the United States, and Nadia shared a few tips. However, Victoria's plans did not work out, and she eventually returned to Russia. Despite this, she maintained a close relationship with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Victoria planned another trip to the United States, and she told Alla that she could help send gifts to Nadia. Trusting Victoria, Alla happily agreed. Alla then brought $6,000 in cash and valuables, including 2 expensive mink coats, to send to Nadia. Victoria then repeatedly postponed her trip to the United States for various reasons, leaving Alla worried about whether she would actually go and what would happen to her gifts. Worried, Alla called her daughter Nadia to express her concerns. Nadia reassured her mother and suggested that she ask Victoria to return her belongings. On October 4, 2014, Alla called Nadia with the good news that she had finally spoken to Victoria, who agreed to return her valuables. However, this never happened, and Alla soon disappeared. Nadia kept calling her mother, but she didn't answer. This was unusual, since they were in contact every day. Worried, Nadia contacted Victoria to ask about her mother. Victoria confirmed that she had seen Alla, and they had talked and had tea together. Victoria then left, never saw Alla again. Victoria mentioned that Alla was planning to go somewhere, but she didn't know where. Victoria also tried to contact Alla, and even visited Alla's apartment to check on her, but there was no sign of her mother being home. Alla was still unreachable. After a few days, Nadia and her brother received a number of unusual text messages from an unknown number, supposedly from their mother Alla. The messages stated that there was no need to look for her because she was happy. However, the way the messages were written was inconsistent with Allah's style, which raised their concerns. Nadia realized that something was definitely wrong and decided to book the next flight to Russia to assist in the investigation into her mother's disappearance. Upon arriving in Krasnodar, Nadia went to her mother's apartment, but it was stripped of valuables that Victoria was supposed to return. There was no trace of her mother. Concerned, Nadia quickly contacted the police and reported her mother's disappearance. She informed the police about her suspicions regarding Victoria, a neighbor of her mother who had become suspiciously close to her and failed to return Alla belongings. It soon became clear that Victoria had a motive to harm Alla. The police were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia called Victoria and pressed Victoria for information about her mother's whereabouts. Victoria, angered by Nadia's questions, shouted that her mother was still alive, but Victoria did not know where she was. The police, who had been listening in on the call, decided to approach Victoria. At her home, she successfully convinced the police that she was not involved and claimed that Nadia's accusations were baseless, with no evidence against her. Meanwhile, Nadia returned to her mother's apartment to investigate. She noticed that the place was surprisingly clean, with no dust, as if it had just been thoroughly cleaned, despite her mother's absence for several days. This raised questions for Nadia. Who could have cleaned the apartment? Additionally, she discovered that several valuable items, including jewelry and $50,000 in cash, were missing. Concerned, Nadia decided to report this to the police. The police, after speaking with Victoria, tried to persuade her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry on a trip and would be back soon. However, Nadia did not buy this explanation. She sensed that her mother was in danger and that it had something to do with Victoria. Nadia reached out to all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where her mother was. In her desperation, Nadia printed flyers with her mother's photo and posted them all over the neighborhood. She also drove around the city, visiting her mother's favorite places, but her efforts were unproductive. Nadia contacted Victoria, begging her to return her mother and expressing her willingness to do anything, even offer a reward. However, Victoria denied any involvement. Despite this, Nadia remained hopeful that her mother was still alive and continued to search. She regularly went to the police for updates, but there was no information about her mother. Determined to find answers, Nadia hired a private investigator. After investigating, the private investigator discovered that Victoria had rented a car from a service center on the day Alla went missing. He checked the car's information and reviewed surveillance camera footage from October 5, 2014. The videos show a car driving on a highway outside the city. There were two people inside, Victoria, who was driving, and Alla Alexenko, motionless in the front passenger seat. She shared this information with the police, who confirmed that Victoria had rented the car and brought her in for questioning. Victoria admitted that she had driven the rental car that morning, October 5, but she denied that there was anyone else in the car with her. Victoria agreed to take a lie detector test. After completing the test, she was released, but the results later showed that she had failed, leading the police to consider her a prime suspect in the case. Before the police could arrest her, Victoria fled the country without notifying the police. They began searching for Victoria. Nadia remained in Russia for another 6 months to assist in the investigation, holding out hope that her mother was still alive. She also contacted Interpol for help in finding Victoria. Police traced the rental car to a dense forest in Armavir, which turned out to be Victoria's hometown. This is where the search for Alla began. Nadia's hopes of her mother's safe return were dashed in April 2015, when police informed her of the tragic news. Her charred remains were found in the same forest, about a 3-hour drive from where Alla went missing. Nadia was able to identify her mother through her dental records, as the rest of her body was badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. Following the identification, an arrest warrant was issued for Victoria Nasirova, and her case was referred to Interpol. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned to the United States. She found it difficult to cope with her mother's death and was unable to work for a long period. Eventually, she gathered her strength and made a promise to her mother that she would seek justice and ensure that those responsible for Alla's death would be punished. One day, Nadia discovered a photo of Victoria on social media. The wanted woman was showing off her lavish lifestyle in Mexico. After discovering this, Nadia contacted the U.S. police to report Victoria's whereabouts, and they began an investigation. At this point, Nadia hired one of the top private detectives in the United States to speed up the investigation. A wealthy friend of Nadia covered the cost of the detective's services, which she could not afford since she had not been working for several months while searching for her mother. The private detective thoroughly examined Victoria's social media photos and was able to confirm that she was already in the U.S. One of the selfies, taken while wearing sunglasses, showed a reflection of a car's dashboard. After examining hundreds, even thousands of cars, the private investigator determined it was a Chrysler 300. The private investigator was able to determine that the last photos were taken in Sheepshead Bay, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. By checking a database of cars in that area, he was able to narrow down his search and identify a suspect. He discovered that Victoria was living with her boyfriend in an apartment complex just 5 blocks from Nadia, and that the Chrysler was registered to her new boyfriend. Victoria was probably unaware that the case had escalated to the point where Interpol had a global warrant for her arrest, which is why she felt safe posting her photos online. The private investigator located the boyfriend and contacted him. It was discovered that he had been poisoned by Victoria. She followed her usual methods of poisoning her boyfriend and even poisoned his beagle, which unfortunately died. Victoria's freedom poses a danger, as her potential victims could increase. The police searched Victoria's apartment and discovered Olga Tzvik's identity card. This discovery sheds light on why Olga was targeted by Victoria. Victoria needed money and valuables, but she also needed an ID that. With her temporary visa about to expire, she was looking to use someone else's ID to avoid returning to Russia, where she would have to stand trial. Police believe she intended to kill Olga, the real owner of the passport, to steal their identity. Fortunately, Olga survived thanks to the quick action of a neighbor. Additionally, the box containing the remains of the cheesecake was sent for analysis, marking a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The investigation returned to the lab, where researchers analyzed the cheesecake. It was determined that Victoria had used a sedative, but she had used a higher dose, which rendered her victims unconscious. Olga was lucky to survive after eating the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was no accident. Heat amplifies the effects of the drug and can even be fatal. Victoria apparently knew this, so she increased the temperature in the house and tried to dress Olga in warmer clothes. But luckily, Olga was discovered by neighbors in time. After her arrest, Victoria denied all allegations against her, including the murder of Alla, who was Nadia's mother. She also rejected claims that she attempted to murder Olga Tzvik and other victims. Victoria had previously been a suspect in the theft of 2 fur items in May 2016, but that case did not progress. Additional incidents emerged involving her in thefts, where she would meet men online, visit their homes, drug them, and rob them. Most of the men chose not to report these crimes to the police due to concerns about publicity, allowing Victoria to evade consequences. The trial was delayed for a long time. The case finally went to court in January 2023, attracting considerable media and public attention. Victoria chose not to testify at the trial and remained silent. The court could not discuss the details of Alla's death because it happened in another country. Victoria's defense argued that there was no evidence that Victoria had poisoned the cheesecake and forced Olga to eat it. Victoria herself ate 2 pieces in front of Olga and had no problems. The prosecution then argued that Victoria had only added poison to one piece of cheesecake, specifically the third piece she offered Olga. She ate the other two pieces without the poison. This misled Olga. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Victoria Nasirova guilty of second-degree murder. Although the maximum sentence for the crime is 25 years, the judge shortened her sentence to 21 years. By law, she could apply for parole after serving 15 years. Victoria faced harsh prison life. She frequently complained about poor food and inadequate medical care. During her incarceration, she was attacked, leaving her scarred and nearly blind. After the attack, Victoria sued the prison, alleging that guards were negligent in failing to support her. The case ended in a $325,000 settlement. In a recent interview from prison, Victoria denied any wrongdoing, including Allah's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with poisoning beautician Olga with the cheesecake, explaining that she had eaten the cheesecake herself and had not become ill. Victoria said that she had only shared a piece of cheesecake with Olga and had not forced her to eat it. After completing her prison sentence in the United States, Victoria will be deported to Russia, where she will face trial for Allah's murder. Her daughter Nadia said she was relieved that Victoria was in prison and would not be able to escape justice.